some without. That is the policy of the state and the legislature at the moment. Today we're going to start with Senator Carter, Senate Bill 852, County Board of Education, Health Education Position. And I believe Senator Carter has Keith Scroggins. Great. And if Melanie Shapiro is here, she can be prepared, or you can take the last seat if you'd like. Is that okay?
Yes.
And we will start with 852. Welcome, Senator Carter.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thanks. It's nice to be back with you, members of the committee. So I'm State Senator Jill Carter, and I represent District 41 in Baltimore City. I'm bringing this bill. I'm going to give my testimony shortly, but I just wanted to kind of preface it with several years ago, back when I was a member of the House of Delegates, I remember, and we all remember, the tragic death of Yardley Love that was killed by her then so-called boyfriend. But even prior to that, there was a young woman named Kristen Marie Mitchell, and she was near and dear to my heart. I met her parents, and for several years as a delegate, I proposed a bill called Kristen's Law, because Kristen Mitchell was killed by her boyfriend also in college, very similar to the Yardley Love tragedy. And her parents were just devastated, and her community was devastated. But beyond that, several of the young women that were in her circle were highly upset because they hadn't seen the signs. They hadn't known what to look for. They didn't know what abuse looked like. And so we talked, and I met with more young women who talked about how if they only had better tools, better education about dating violence and relationship violence, they would have been better prepared to help their friends and also to save themselves. And back then, several young women came in and testified, and often a lot of our domestic violence advocates talk about the trauma and how people are re-traumatized when they have to go to court or come to a public forum like this and tell their horrible stories. But several of the young women talked about how they would not go to school, they'd stop going to school, they'd not want to bathe, their hygiene would suffer, their fashion sense, because they were so traumatized by it. And they came to this body, and I'm just saying it because it's important, they came to this body and presented the case, but we never did anything about it. We never ever fixed that problem. And it's always burned me. And so when Keith Scroggins reached out to me this summer and had some interest in the issue with the One Love Foundation, I was ecstatic because I'm thinking, well, maybe we can do something. This bill isn't exactly that. It isn't exactly specifically about dating violence, but we think that by taking this step of establishing a health educator leadership position in every jurisdiction, that will be a step in the right direction. And so with that, I'll briefly give my prepared testimony, and then I'll happy to hear from Keith Scroggins and take any questions. So basically, this bill, Senate Bill 852, seeks to establish a health educator leadership position to oversee the implementation of a comprehensive skill-based health education. It is consistent with previous legislation passed by this body that ensures health curriculum includes awareness of boundaries and consent and prevention of sexual and relationship abuse. This bill provides the oversight needed to ensure that the health curriculum is monitored and evaluated by a professional with expertise in the field. According to the fiscal note, the Maryland State Department of Education reports that only 11 of 24 school systems have a health educator leader who is certified in health education. Health education addresses highly unique topics such as violence prevention, mental and emotional health, family life, and human sexuality, substance use prevention, disease prevention, and healthy eating. Teachers need support from an expert on how to teach health education safely and effectively. It's important that we find ways to support children as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. Health education provides them with the skills and habits they need to be productive, thriving as adults. Students who receive comprehensive health education make safer, more informed, and less destructive choices. They eat and sleep better and are more physically active. They are stronger communicators, more aware of behaviors that support mental and emotional health, and better able to identify and seek help from trusted adults. In order for comprehensive health education to be impactful, a professional needs to monitor and evaluate it for success. And for the reasons I stated, I would urge a favorable report for this bill. I realize that there is likely to be opposition, as there always is whenever we seek to add protocols or mandates to our school systems or our curriculum. But I do think that if we can take a step in this direction, I think it will be impactful and it will make a difference in the lives of young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scroggins, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Penske, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is J. Keith Scroggins, and I serve as the manager for volunteers and policy for the One Love Foundation in the Mid-Atlantic region. We are an organization dedicated to prevention of relationship and domestic abuse. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak today in support of this bill. I also want to thank Senator Jill Carter for introducing this bill, and I hope that after today's hearing, many of you will join Senator Carter as co-sponsors of SB 852. First, I'd like to provide some information that will explain why the One Love Foundation is in full support of this bill. One Love began out of a relationship violence tragedy, the death of Baltimore native Yardley Love in 2010. Her death was 100% preventable if she or anyone around her had understood the signs of an unhealthy and increasingly dangerous relationship. Realizing this truth, her family started One Love to create dynamic educational tools and workshops that youth-facing organizations, including schools, could use to ensure their young people have a common language for understanding relationship health and knowing what to do with an unhealthy relationship before it becomes abuse. As you know, relationship and domestic violence are public health epidemics in this country and have been long before the COVID pandemic began. While rarely discussed, we know that over 1 in 3 women, nearly 1 in 2 non-binary folks, and 1 in 3 teenage girls will be in an abusive relationship in their lifetime. Yet over 80% of parents don't think or don't know if teen dating violence is an issue. The problem is widespread, it's in every community, and until One Love, primary prevention approaches targeting young people at earlier ages had not been pursued. One Love's content is free because Yardley's mom wanted to ensure that all could access these programs, and to date, One Love has educated 156,000 people in 9 Maryland counties and Baltimore City, and built active partnerships with 140 schools and community-based organizations like the Maryland Center for School Safety, Free State Justice, the Baltimore Ravens, the Naval Academy, and the Maryland Office of Crime Control and Prevention. With this amount of work and partnerships that One Love has, why is SB 852 so important? It's because it requires certified health educators and teachers to teach health education in the state's public schools. Other legislation enacted in previous years did not mention certified health educators at all, only trained teachers. SB 852 provides the missing piece of certification framework from the health educator field. It also helps the health educator for MSDE to oversee the quality and effectiveness of the health education that our students truly need. We're so excited that the state has created an extensive set of health standards, health education framework, and diverse health topics. This is good. However, there is now a chance to specify who will teach the age-appropriate coursework and how they should be certified. Our students' mental and emotional health depend on it. SB 852 does not require the hiring of hundreds or dozens of health educators. There are significant relationships that school systems, such as Baltimore City has, with local health departments who supply health educators to teach the curriculums established by the districts. Teachers already employed in this area can gain their certification and teach. Specific relationship and self-education health education requirements will greatly expand our educators' abilities to support our state's youth with the proper health education. This will not only help change the statistics around teen abuse, but will have an even broader impact, such as fewer suspensions, a reduction in abuse, and better informed students. Think about it. We simply can't have healthy communities without healthy relationships. On behalf of the One Love Foundation and the students of Maryland, I ask this committee to look favorably upon this bill and move it forward onto the path of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scroggins. Let's go to Ms. Shapiro, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you,
Please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Melanie Shapiro. I'm the Public Policy Director with the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. We are the State Domestic Violence Coalition, and I'm pleased to be here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 852, and I'd like to thank Senator Carter for bringing this bill. Just this session alone, there's been 2 bills that are coming over from the House to this committee, HB 194, which is about sexting education in schools, and HB 165, which is about human and sex trafficking education in schools. The importance of having somebody designated to be certified and ensure that students are taught properly is of the utmost importance to get to our ultimate goal, which is primary prevention. I hope you all know what primary prevention is, but in case for those of you that don't, primary prevention is preventing domestic violence before it occurs. We don't want to have to intervene. We don't have to deal with the results and the aftermath of the domestic violence once it happens, because it's traumatic and it's very difficult for people to recover from. However, if we go to primary prevention, it's never happening in the first place. The CDC, in fact, came out with a report in 2017. It is, there's a hyperlink in my testimony that I submitted to that report, and it talks about all the different ways that we can get to our ultimate goal of primary prevention, and one of them is education in schools. So the other important aspect of the bill is requiring data collection to ensure that, in fact, the education that we are offering is effective. And so for all of those reasons, we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 852.
Thank you. Questions for any of the panel members? Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Carter, for this bill. And quick question. So this bill requires, say, each county to hire one health educator. And so that educator will be to just develop curriculum that others teach, or would that educator be allowed, well, do you envision that person go around and teach classes on this issue?
My thought is that that person would be the one to develop the curriculum, but as Mr. Scroggins testified, there would be no prohibition on a teacher becoming certified to gain that ability as well. That person would be able, though, to teach the curriculum.
Okay. So are there health teachers in the schools now, you know?
Yes.
Is there? Okay. Yes, okay. Thanks.
Senator Washington.
Thank you. Thank you for this bill, and I share your concern and disappointment that we're not doing enough to protect young women and men and educate. And thanks so much for the foundation and for your work. Currently under Maryland Code, and this might be what you're referencing, Senator, there is a dating violence and diabetes treatment and prevention that's supposed to be a part of health education. And then there's a part of the code that talks about the awareness and prevention of sexual abuse and sexual assault. But you're right, there's we say the state board shall encourage county boards to incorporate age-appropriate lessons. You were talking about this issue, and I don't see it in the bill. So I was just wondering, is this, the bill doesn't specifically mention
Dating violence.
and awareness.
It does not specifically mention it, I
Right.
guess because I felt that in the past, when I tried to do that, it did not work. So I
Yeah,
figured
so-
that if we had this specific point person,
Right.
since we already have the language that you've read,
Right.
to encourage the teaching of this, that
Right.
person could kind of oversee to ensure
Yeah.
that. But listen, this committee is the
different.
expert committee on all education policy, and
Right.
I would defer to you if you suggested to add language. And I'd also point you, if you probably see it, but there's also a sponsor amendment in the package as well that kind of clarifies a few terms. But you're right, it does not specifically say dating violence.
Right, right. And so, again, this is a different committee, and I get it. So your non-negotiated bill, your pre-amended bill would specifically include these. That's what I'm asking. It would reference this part of the code, and would you be wanting to direct that there be a health educator to specifically coordinate these things that are already in Maryland code? Is that the interest? I mean, I want to get at what you really want
Yeah,
to
so the interest is
accomplish.
coordinating it, but for age appropriateness.
Yes, yeah.
And with the specific subject in mind. And again, if, I'm happy to
Yeah, okay.
make another amendment if need be.
And just for my colleagues, it's in the Education Code 7-411-1 and 7-439, where we already passed those. So again, thank you, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and Mrs. Scroggins or Senator, I want to follow up because I guess I'm a little confused. A unit on health education is a requirement to graduate in Maryland. So every high school, at least, has a health educator. And among the requirements are prevention of sexual abuse and assault, as well as other things. And as I understand it, they try to make their curriculum age appropriate. The middle school kids get certain things, high school get another. And while not every county has a county-wide health educator, I hear that. I'm trying to guess what we're trying to do here.
Well, what's important, if you look at all of the previous legislation, it does call for a variety of topics. It's talking about dating abuse and sexual abuse and
Right.
age-appropriate education, but in nowhere is there anything that the health educators have to be certified. In some districts, there are people who work in health education who are not certified to teach health education. And we are simply asking, one, to have someone from MSDE to coordinate that, and there is a health educator position at MSDE. And we're also asking for all of the counties to make a health educator available for all schools. Not every school, there aren't, let's say Baltimore City has 160 schools, there aren't 160 health educators. So what we're simply saying is that we want to be sure that these individuals are certified annually and that they have the right credentials and teach these lessons to our young people in an age-appropriate manner.
So two questions, just, again, I want to understand this. If someone is teaching health education, in other words, if someone's teaching out of field, if a social studies teacher is teaching, I hate to say chemistry, but something like that, if they stay in that position too long, they have to seek certification. So I guess my question is, if someone is assigned health education and they do it for 2 or 3 years, and again, I haven't memorized the code, do they have to seek health education certification through the state? I would assume they have to. I don't know.
I would assume that also, Senator. However, there's nothing that I've found that actually requires it, and that's the problem. No one's checking.
Okay, and the final question, I don't know if there's a requirement in elementary school to teach health education. I know there is in high school for graduation. Mm-hmm. So are you suggesting there be another piece of the curriculum in K-5 or whatever, K-6, on health education that is distinct from?
Absolutely. For instance, the One Love Foundation has a variety of content that we make available to high schools. We have content for middle schools and for elementary schools. In elementary schools, of course, it doesn't involve relationship abuse or
Sure.
violence. We have things we call the friendlets, which is sort of like cartoon characters, and the couplets. And they teach about relationship in terms of friendships. What is abusive, what is good, what is bad.
Right.
And so it's age appropriate, and that's what we want to see in the state.
Okay, first of all, thanks for clarifying. You know, one of the challenges we have is we get numerous recommendations of adding to the curriculum, of teaching this, teaching that, whatever. And there are only so many hours in the day, and it gets to be a complicated question. Do we cut math? Do we cut reading? Do we cut whatever? And also legislating curriculum. And again, I'm very sympathetic. I followed that case, what happened in Durham at Duke University with her getting murdered, horrible. But we always have to balance how much we tell the local schools they have to teach an additional curriculum and what they have to move out or not move out. So it's always a delicate balance with many much-needed things, but figuring out, you know, we have a list of 12 bills of other curriculums that should be taught in elementary, middle, or high school, and it puts us sometimes in a very challenging position. But we're clearly going to look at this, and I'm glad you brought it to us and clarified what you're trying to do here. So thank you all.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Senator. I just want to conclude with, I completely understand, and I talked to Mr. Scroggins, and I told him that this would be a heavy lift, and that I wasn't even that enthusiastic because I had tried so hard as a delegate to do something. But the truth is, this is a trauma prevention bill, and if we don't do something to address these trauma issues, then all of the other stuff really doesn't matter very much. So that's why I think it is critically important. And again, you don't have the testimony from all these people today, but over many years, there were many people that testified on this. It's a real issue, and I believe, if I recall, the tween violence is even more prevalent than the teen violence. And tweens are like, 10 to 12-year-olds, which is pretty incredible. Thank you.
Absolutely right on all counts, Senator. Thank you. There is no unfavorable oral testimony. There is some written. People can read that at their leisure. That concludes the hearing on 852. Senator Bailey, let's go with you. Then we'll go to Senator Huff. Senator Bailey, it's 583, reporting of classroom disruption.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This bill would require the Maryland Center for School Safety to establish a website for anonymous reporting of classroom disruptions and refer disruptions received through this website to an appropriate county superintendent. This bill would also require the school system to submit a response to this report to the Maryland Center for School Safety. This committee and Senate have already spent a significant amount of time discussing the importance of classroom discipline and ensuring that all students in our state are given the opportunity to have a safe learning environment. This Senate bill is one tool to provide additional oversight for classroom discipline and give Maryland parents confidence that our local school systems are promoting an environment that is free of disruption when students are able to safely learn. This bill would establish a level of oversight that currently does not exist. Incidents have arisen over the past several years, particularly, and as I was a member of this committee, I remember those 2 long days that we spent listening to the incidents at the Maryland School for the Deaf that proved and showed the silos that the administration had put up and the parents weren't aware of it, as well as with the use of the restraints and seclusion in both Calvert and Frederick counties in the last couple of years show why there's a need for greater oversight over school discipline. We have seen in these cases how one parent sharing their story with the public often leads to numerous coming forward. It's almost like a wave. This bill provides for more proactive reporting mechanisms and detailed responses to address these incidents. Failing to respond to disruptive behavior through the appropriate discipline causes a situation in where other students are unable to learn because of one disruptive student. What is far more troubling is that the disruptive student may not have their behavioral needs met. They might not be addressed and will continue to not learn and inhibit the ability of others to receive an education if their behavior is not responded to accordingly. This bill will ensure that the superintendents are aware of behavioral issues in the classroom. It will also ensure that other parents are aware that the superintendent is familiar with it. And running this initiative through the state entity will ensure proper oversight to have these reports addressed, while still leaving the decision-making on school discipline to the local school system. These examples that I've referenced, we just don't know what is occurring until they're reported. I'm also submitting an amendment in response to concerns that I've heard from the school system about this legislation. This amendment defines a disruption as engaging in intentional behavior that distracts from the learning environment or directly affects the safety of others. The amendment also gives local superintendents 90 days. In the bill in front of you, it was 45 days, met with the superintendents. They thought 45 days might be a little bit quick with everything else they had going on. It also removes the local Board of Education from the process and alters the date for the report required under the bill to August the 1st. That way we can ensure one whole year of data be in each report. I respectfully request a favorable report and prepare to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Bailey. And thank you for the bill. I wanted to ask you, you specifically are working with the Maryland Center for School Safety. And I know that they, right now, I believe, have a tip line for those who may want to report a threat of violence or other dangerous situations. Did you see this as the logical extension of working with them on now this next level of reporting these disruptions, and can they work it in their existing infrastructure?
So they currently don't have this website built. This is, if you look in that physical note, you will see that this is something that they have to construct. But the issue is, and what we've seen in some of these other counties, especially when I reference what we saw in the hearing with the School for the Deaf, was the fact that there was nowhere, right, that anywhere in one state, one place. And there's a Center for School Safety, and I just think that is the best place for that to be housed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bailey, and thank you for this bill. I do agree that disruptions should be reported, but what's interesting is I think that, so at the moment, I guess a couple years ago, we started reporting suspensions and doing disaggregated. So, you know, as you know, because you voted on the bill, we do already have a definition and there's parts of the code for disruption. So I think it would be interesting to report those in the similar way that we report suspensions. But are you aware of anywhere else that this disruptions are reported? This is not at all rhetorical. This is a genuine question.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
And that's why
Right,
I think, and what we've heard, especially in my local office, when I've had parents come in and discuss restraint and seclusion, and then I've worked with the superintendents and read some of the governor, the reports that they do. Nowhere is disruptions at all there. That's why I thought the need to bring this bill.
Yeah, because I just again want to work with you to clarify the bill and to help it serve a purpose.
Senator, I'd very much look forward to working with you on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just the question of, currently there are under suspensions, and just letting you know, there is a category of disruption, but that, like you said, that's not broken out. And so breaking out by school district, and on suspensions, we also report out gender, race, disability status. You wouldn't have any problem of reporting all that out, all
No.
those out? Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. So it looks like there's two types of responses from the Maryland Center for School Safety. I'm sorry. There's two responses, one from the Maryland Center for School Safety, and the other one is from the county superintendent. Are you anticipating that every report of a disruption will be reported back by the county superintendent and the board to the Maryland Center for School Safety each and every disruption?
Yes.
And then at the end of the year, they compile it more as an analytical tool.
That's correct.
So tell me about the benefit of reporting each and every disruption. And I presume, is it your anticipation that the superintendent and the school board will provide a response about what they did about it? Or just that they report it back?
So I removed the school board from the bill. There's an amendment. And then with the superintendent's response, yes. I think that it's very important that we keep the superintendent and we keep a track of exactly what is happening in that school.
Very good. Senator, you know I presume you know the answer to this because I don't know from my county. In your county, how many disruptions would there have been in the past 12 months?
I don't know the answer to that.
Could there be thousands?
I have no idea.
Okay, it just, I understand the intent. One of the first bills I put in 13 years ago in this committee had to do with disciplinary reports and the lack of responsiveness from the principal back to the classroom teacher. So I understand all this. I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to create a logistical nightmare, create more bureaucracy, and I'm anticipating, unfortunately, since I presume all the reports will have personal data redacted, that there's going to be a lot of canned responses.
Senator, if we have thousands of responses from each county about the disruptions, this bill has done exactly what it was supposed to do. It would show that our education system is in serious trouble, right? We should not have thousands of responses, but we don't know what we don't know.
I understand. So would it be better to look for that aggregate report at the end of the year as opposed to having the superintendent respond in less than a thorough manner for each of the number of disruptions that occur?
So I'm going to refer to something that happened earlier today when President Ferguson referred to the fact that when a bill came to a committee, it then belonged to that committee. And I would say that I would leave that to you and your very able committee to be able to determine what you feel is best.
Thank you. Senator, good bill, good goal. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That completes the hearing on this bill. Thank you for joining us again, Senator Bailey.
Thank you.
Senator Huff, 702, Baltimore County, Frederick County Career Exploration and Development Activities, sale of coffee. Aha. I think we've addressed this before. Welcome.
Thank you very much. This is a local bill. It was a request from Frederick County Public Schools. You may remember 2 years ago, I brought down with me a member of the school board, and I had a couple of the students come. Currently in Maryland, there's a prohibition in public schools selling caffeinated beverages. Baltimore County currently has an exemption they use for students who are disabled, use it in their programs that they sell coffee in the morning, they make it available. And the students basically say it's an easy beverage to make, and the students, it's very rewarding, helpful, and essentially they want the same exemption that Baltimore County has for Frederick County. So I would just ask that you all pass this local bill and give us the same courtesy as Baltimore County has.
Thank you. No other witness signed up. Thank you for joining us, Senator Huff. Senator Lamb.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Huff. I had a question about this bill because it's labeled as a Baltimore County and Frederick County bill.
Yeah.
And, even though you're just highlighting it for Frederick County, which you represent, I also represent parts of Baltimore County, which is why I wanted to take a closer look at this. So this also affects Baltimore County then too, with what you're proposing, right?
Baltimore County already has the exemption, so Frederick County just wants the same exemption.
But you also add some limiting language in here. It says directed at or organized by students with IEPs, individualized education programs, right?
Yeah, and I asked, that's what Frederick County Public Schools requested, and I asked them why, and basically, they feel that that language they've added at the end of the bill, that right now it's overly limits them. So you're right in that, in the bottom part, that would, if the committee chooses to pass it with that part, it would expand it, because Frederick County Public Schools felt that the current language was, or the current law was too exclusionary.
Well, it would actually contract it, right? It would narrow it because it says that they can only sell if it's directed at or organized by students with IEPs. So it's more limiting. It's a limiting qualification, not an expanding qualification.
I guess an executive may not ban or regulate, well, it's may not, so it's adding a not in here. Because the law right now, executive branch agency may ban or regulate the sale, may not, directed at students with individual educational programs in school. So the way it was explained to me was that they wanted to expand, that they felt it was too limiting now. At least that was the intent of the way it was explained to me.
Would you have any objection just to restrict that to Frederick County then? Because this does touch on the.
I don't, and to be honest too, in this bill, I brought it in 2 years ago, and it's funny you brought that up, because I just asked about that too. Why? Originally, when this bill came in, all we did was add it to Frederick County, the same section as Baltimore County. My honest opinion, I would not be upset if we just added Frederick County to the existing Baltimore County section, because that's what the bill originally did. This was at Frederick County Public Schools' request that this language that they felt it would help them expand the program. And I'll be happy to I can get more information for them why they specifically wanted that.
Okay, so you would have no opposition if we just added Frederick County clean? I
No,
guess.
that was the original bill, so I'm fine with that too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and I support that as well. I was in Ways and Means when this bill first came in, and there was a concern about expansion, and just the public health problems associated with caffeine. And we gave the exemption because it was presented as a job training opportunity for a specific population. So I think your amendment to just add it clean as a job training with the restrictions and not expanding it beyond is appropriate. So
I'm totally fine with that too, because this bill, I think I had this 2 years ago and we weren't able to move it. So the students that I brought down with me, there was exactly that. It's career, training, and it's an easy program for them. It's well-liked and popular, so I'm completely fine. I don't know why the school system wanted to amend it. I can get that answer for you, but I always believe, let's start simple with a bill that hasn't passed a couple times, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Casserly. This is 620, Articulation Agreements and Transfer Procedures Work Group Study. We will start with the good senator, followed by Teresa Felder, who may come up, please, and Timozia Graves and George Badilis. If it's a little tight quarters, somebody can wait in the first row. And then there's no one signed up orally in opposition, written nor written. Senator, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, committee members, Senator Cassidy on behalf of Senate Bill 620. As a parent who had children, who has children, but who did attend the community colleges and then transferred on to state schools, it was very frustrating to go through a process where they find out as they're transferring into the four-year institution that courses that they took in the community college didn't transfer for whatever reason. And that's really what this bill is all about, is that if I'm taking a prerequisite course at a community college, I ought to know that it's not going into the University of Maryland or not going into another school. I know that before I paid the money for that course. And so we need to identify up front what makes these, how do we establish that a course is transferable? So with that, I just allow the the experts in this to testify, who can really lay out why there's a problem with this, with the current system that MHEC is running, and ask for your support for the work group. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Senator, we're going to hear from all of your witnesses. There is another bill that we heard, Senate Bill 540. Folks may be, that covers much of the same territory. And again, if while you speak to your comments, if you want to show why one is deficient,
Thank you.
please feel free to do that. Please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Pinsky and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dr. Teresa Felder, and I'm the president of Hartford Community College. I am testifying today in strong support of Senator Cassidy's Senate Bill 620, the Articulation Agreements and Transfer Procedures Work Group Study. I'm here today to advocate for community college students, not just those at Hartford Community College, but students at all 16 of Maryland's community colleges. In 2019, over 4,000 students transferred from a community college to one of Maryland's public four-year colleges or universities. These ambitious students are eager to complete their education and enter the workforce. But we know that nationally, students lose on average 43% of their college credits when they transfer between higher education institutions. And although we have legislation in Maryland that addresses the transfer of credits between community colleges and four-year institutions, community college students have continued to lose credits during the transfer process. As you know, when students lose credits, they may need to retake courses to complete a bachelor's degree, which is a loss of both time and money for students. For some of the students we serve, this translates to a delay in entering the workforce. But for others, the financial burden of taking additional courses is too great, and they abandon college altogether. I believe you as committee members already understand and appreciate the importance of supporting an improved transfer process for students. Last week, you heard testimony on behalf of Senate Bill 540, which creates a new electronic platform to facilitate transfer, which is a critical element for improving transfer success for our students. Senate Bill 620 builds on this important step by creating a work group to explore all the barriers that prevent community college students from successfully transferring their credits to four-year institutions. The work group would include representatives from community colleges, the University System of Maryland, and McCua. With representation from all these types of institutions, I am confident that we can begin to eliminate the barriers that prevent our students from successfully transferring their credits between institutions. Collectively, Maryland's 16 community colleges serve over 100,000 students. Fixing the transfer system could mean more students enrolling at four-year institutions, more skilled laborers in our workforce, and quicker pathways to employment, all of which will benefit Maryland and our economy. Senate Bill 620 will enable Maryland's post-secondary institutions to examine the policies and procedures that relate to the transfer process with the goal of reducing credit and course transfer denials in order to better serve our Maryland students. For all the reasons I have discussed and the additional insights that will be provided by my colleagues, I ask for your favorable report on Senate Bill 620.
Thank you, Dr. Felder. Either one of you, you can choose whatever order to go in.
I'll go next.
Please.
Good afternoon. My name is George Bedelis, and I am one of the academic advisors at Hartford Community College. I am testifying today in strong support of Senator Cassidy's Senate Bill 620, the Articulation Agreements and Transfer Procedures Work Group Study. As an academic advisor who works directly with Hartford Community College's transfer students, I have encountered all kinds of hurdles along the way. This legislation, if passed, will give students a better opportunity to have their hard-earned community college credits count when they transfer to one of Maryland's four-year colleges and universities. As Dr. Felder mentioned, we have an ongoing issue with loss of credit in transfer that existing legislation has not yet fixed. We often hear that schools transfer in a maximum amount of credits that they can. But what really matters is how many of those credits are being applied towards the degree that the student wants. I get students that often come back to me and say, the school has taken all 60 of my credits, but they still need 75 credits to graduate. When we look at the details of the transfer evaluation, we see that some classes didn't ultimately count as equivalents. We need to focus on having these credits being applied to the degree as much as we need to focus on transferring them in. These are the kind of issues that can be examined more closely in a work group. Some four-year colleges also believe they need to test transfer students to make sure they learn the content before awarding credit for certain courses. Community college courses are taught by highly talented, credentialed faculty that bear the same rigor as those taught in four-year institutions. Those credits should be awarded at both institutions. Some states have implemented a common course numbering system. The members of the work group that would be created by Senate Bill 620 could look at options like this for our transfer issues. Senate Bill 620 calls for representatives from community colleges, the University System of Maryland, and MICUA schools, with representation from all
Senator
these types of
Mr. Boudelis, you're going to have to conclude your testimony. Clock has run off. Take another sentence. I don't want to.
Okay. Senate Bill 620 will enable Maryland post-secondary institutions to reduce credit and course transfer denials and better serve Maryland students. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Graves?
Good afternoon. My name is Timoja Graves, and I am a graduate of Harvard Community College who transferred to Towson University Northeastern, also known as TUNE. I am testifying today in strong support of Senator Castley, Senate Bill 620. As a current graduate student at Towson University, I have endured many challenges to get to where I am today. However, my journey as a transfer student was seamless. Having this bill approved would enable more students to have a seamless transfer experience. My experience as a transfer student was unique. I worked as a peer mentor work study student, as well as landing a peer advising assistant position in advising career and transfer services office while attending Harvard Community College. I had the privilege of working with many students and served as a guide as they navigated the transfer process. As a result, I saw firsthand the benefits of transferring and the positive outcomes of it if done properly. I was the type of student who didn't want to feel behind, so I made every effort to ensure I would graduate from HCC on time and transfer to my chosen four-year university. When I discovered that TUNE had started a communication studies program, I knew that was where I wanted to transfer to. HCC and TUNE provided program folders with detailed information about which classes students need to take at Harvard before transferring and which classes they should take after transferring. This made the entire process easy. Seeing my course path outlined so clearly reduced the stress of the transfer process. All of my credits transferred, and I was able to avoid the financial strain of having to retake classes. As a community college employee, I know that the clear path I took was a result of careful planning between Harvard Community College and Towson. But I also know that not every student has an easy transfer process. In my current role at Harvard Community College, as a mentor, I work with students every week who lose credits in the transfer process. This means that they need to spend the time and money retaking classes they thought would transfer. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ms. Graves. Question to the panel. Senator Ellis, followed by Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator Castley, for this bill. Over the years, I've heard about difficulties a lot of community college students have transferring course load. And this is my first bill here in really tackling the issue. Issues where you will have students take a lot of classes for the 2 years, say go into the engineering program, and after maybe the first year, a lot of those classes are not accepted, except maybe for, I guess the term general education out there, so they have to retake a lot of these classes. So you're saying that problem still exists, and it's what percentage of your students who go on after, say, graduating with their 2-year degree, do you know of have to really retake classes?
Yeah, it is a common issue for our students. Oh, I'm sorry. It is a common issue. As George talked about, he advises students on a daily basis. And the issue is there are schools that will take the credits, as you talked about, but apply them to general education, not to the academic program. So students still lose, so to speak, credits, lose time because they're not applied. Here, in this state, you have to have an articulation agreement with each school for each program, which makes it's challenging to do that. So students then don't always have an articulation agreement necessarily with every school in the state. So we do have a common issue with students losing credits because of that.
Yeah, can you quantify number
would you
who actually
quantify-
graduate?
So
The number?
we can't say a number per se, but, so for example, let's say you mentioned engineering. If a student takes mechanical engineering and they take intro to engineering design, which is, you have to take it in your freshman year, even at the University of Maryland, statics, mechanics and materials, and dynamics, you take all those in your first 2 years. Well, if the four-year school doesn't transfer those courses in, and then you transfer in, well, you're a year behind. We're 2 years behind if they don't take any of them. So bringing the credits in is really not the problem as much as bringing the equivalents in. And really, this group, I think, would be great because it brings all the people at the table together to talk about it, to try to figure out solutions to the problem.
So equivalence is when the school that matriculates that individual not just accept the credit, but gives them credit
same
for
class.
the same class.
That's exactly
So
right.
they can move to the next level. And so
Yes,
that's where the real problem lies.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief because I'm teeing off Senator Ellis's question, and I think this question is probably for Senator Casserly. I represent Warwick Community College, and you made a point to say that you were representing all of the community colleges, and I see that they have a letter of support.
yes.
So that's very helpful to see. I was trying to get a handle on that number of those that are pretty much like being delayed. And my question, because I think that's an important number, because my question to Senator Casserly is how this will help the workforce shortage that we have in every major industry on the shore and across the state of Maryland.
Question for Senator Casserly?
I mean, how you see it impacting that workforce shortage?
We're going to have one of you on that. We have too many bills. You choose whoever, but we're not going to have everyone answer the question.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Felder. She's eminently more qualified than I to respond to that, so.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my testimony, when we delay, when we don't take credits, it delays the graduation for our students. So, and in some cases, that delay, students can run out of financial aid. They can run out of, if they're paying out of pocket, they can run out of funds. So they don't enter the workforce at the level that they were intending to do so. So when we don't take credits, when we don't have a seamless process between the community college and our four-year institutions, it's problematic for students to finish their goal of getting a degree. And that, of course, impacts the workforce.
Get them in there faster.
Yes,
Thanks.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for this bill. And I'm trying to resolve what we heard from the testimony from the prior bill and this. So I just have three things just to address. I won't give a preamble. There, in the letter from USM, they say that there is a provost transfer council. So one, and that there are representatives from the community colleges on that. Is that something, yeah, were you aware of that's there, and is there problems with that?
I do know that MHEC has a group that works on the issue. I don't, this bill, though, would ensure that that work continues. Right. So the bill that you saw last week introduced a system to ensure that, as far as planning goes, there's a system for planning.
Right.
But without a good policy and procedure,
Right.
the system won't fix the issue. So this bill ensures that all of the players come to the table and ensures that we have good policy and procedure to impact successful transfer, which I think is an add-on, a build-on to what you heard last week.
And the second thing we need to clarify for this bill is that they also assert that articulation agreements and transfer credits are the purview of the academic programs of the four-year institution
That's
and
correct.
not MHEC. And then the third is that in the bill, it doesn't include those people that are directly responsible for those articulation agreements.
It does in that, so yes, the receiving institution, it's their purview whether they take community college credit or not. And many times, it is true that faculty are making those decisions at the faculty level. This bill talks about, with the work group, the vice president of academic affairs is at the table, which those are higher level decision makers. It has the student affairs, which those are folks that have the advisors working on it. So it does elevate that conversation a bit, which I think is necessary in ensuring that these conversations really are effective.
And I'll add that there's a proposed amendment which would add appointees from the chancellor of the University System of Maryland, three appointees to beat that.
Yeah, I guess just not you don't include the provost, which the provost is above any vice president,
Well,
right, or no?
Sometimes it's equivalent. Some
really?
schools have a vice president of academic affairs, larger schools,
And
that
the
title is
provosts are the
provost.
same.
Yes.
Okay, all right. There is one more. There's this Artsy transfer platform?
Artsys, that's a
Yeah.
platform that I talked about that is very helpful in planning. If there are articulation agreements that are in place, then that helps folks like George advise students.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes, I believe, the hearing on this panel. The other bill, Senate Bill 540, Senator Elfrith, had some amendments in the House. So I would encourage you to look at that. It might be a little bit different from how it came in, and we'll see how close it is. And we may take up both bills together. So
Very good.
we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Heddleman, I believe, is next. Yes. Student athletes, requirements and reports. We'll lead with the Senator from Baltimore County. She'll be followed by Martin McNair of the McNair Foundation. Then we'll hear from Chantrez Shaw and Wes Robinson. And then they will be followed by Douglas Phillips. If there's not enough space, people can sit in the first row. I do not see anybody signed up either for oral testimony or written testimony in opposition. So with that, Senator Heddleman, welcome DHE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I think it looks like we've lost a bunch, but anyway, I'm happy to be here.
Senator, and to people who are watching the streaming, people have bills being heard in other committees.
I know.
So they will be coming and going because they're called into finance or budget and tax to present testimony on their own bills. So it is not that people are lagging somewhere else or playing, but they're working in somewhere else in the complex. So we hope there's understanding of that issue. Thanks for pointing that out, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know the vice chair is over in JPR where I just came from, so very important bills all the way around. But this is a really important bill, and you're going to hear some testimony today that I think is very heartfelt and heartbreaking at the same time. And I hope everyone will give this bill the serious consideration that it deserves. I know this committee will. This bill is named in honor of Elijah Gorham, and Elijah Gorham was a 17-year-old Baltimore City student athlete who died on October 11th, 2021, after suffering a traumatic brain injury during a football game about a month earlier. And you'll hear shortly from Ms. Shaw, Elijah's mom, about that experience. I also want to introduce, and they'll have an opportunity to talk, Marty McNair, who is Jordan McNair's dad, and Tanya, Jordan McNair's mom, who also tragically died on the side of a field after a University of Maryland football game. And then there's another student, Marquise Redo, who died at a football game also, Morgan State, a number of years ago. And these are the names of high school and college athletes who died loving playing a sport, right? So many of us played sports in high school and college, and I just think there are so many things that we can be doing better in order to be able to prevent these kinds of injuries and deaths. We all know that student athletes are subject to injury, and we expect that. But there are things that we can be doing and we can be requiring of our trainers and our coaches and our school systems in order to be able to address those injuries and to prevent needless death. This bill, as amended, and we've worked through this bill over the past many weeks, and I hope you have, we sent it over an amended version in front of you, has several key components. And I want to talk about the most important one in my mind first, and that is the creation of venue-specific emergency action plans. And what those are the appropriate folks, the coaches, the school administrators sitting down and saying, we have doing it planfully and thoughtfully before there's an emergency, and saying, we have a student that goes down on a football field or on a basketball court or on a field hockey court or on a lacrosse field, which are different places around the campus, have different access points, ingress, egress points for emergency medical systems, professionals to be able to access a campus, if it, at a school, middle school or high school we're talking about here. And we need to very clearly and in a detailed way go through and figure out who has responsibility for each of the things that we need in the event of an emergency. Who has the key to open the gate to let the ambulance in? Who has who knows how to operate this door to let the folks into, the gym? Who is responsible for calling 911? Even a basic thing like that, and kind of step through the worst nightmare scenarios and put that in a plan, and make sure that those plans are accountable and are overseen by MSDE. So a couple of other points. We want to make sure, and we already do require that that our coaches have training on AEDs, and we have, this body has put into law that they have to have AEDs, automated external defibrillators, and cold water immersion instruments on site. That doesn't mean that, what it does mean is that they have to be accessible to those fields and to the places that will need them. They can't be locked up in a nurse's office. They have to be accessible by the trainer or by the person who's responsible during that practice or during that game. We want to beef up the training requirements for those AEDs and the cold water immersion, and make sure that those folks are at those school-sponsored practices and events. We also want to make sure and develop education so that students can recognize signs in themselves and in their peers. So we want them to be aware of traumatic brain injury, of concussion, of heat stroke, and things like that, to be able to look at themselves and kind of be able to know the warning signs. And again, finally, those venue-specific emergency action plans are really the most important things, and the things that can be the difference between life and death. I am going to turn it over now to my panel, and you will hear directly from them, and then I will be happy to answer any questions. But I really do believe that this legislation is really important to equip the students and the staff and the coaches and others and the families and the communities with the necessary tools to keep athletes safe on and off the field. And what we are trying to do is to avoid any more tragedies and any more losses of our student athletes. So I thank you for your attention and for your work on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Let's have Mr. McNair. Mr. McNair, we always keep your son's memory in our hearts. Obviously, I think all of us were affected by it and followed it at the University of Maryland and what happened some years ago. So,
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Obviously, I'm Martin McNair. I'm the father of Jordan McNair and the founder of the Jordan McNair Foundation. It's a pleasure to join this bill as co-sponsor, Senator Shelley Heddleman, by providing oral testimony in support of Senate Bill 638, the Elijah Gorham Act. Since 2018, the Jordan McNair Foundation has been promoting awareness, education, and prevention around heat-related illnesses and injuries, as well as improving player safety in sports among coaches, parents, and student athletes. Bill 638 is necessary because the Centers for Disease Control reports that over 40 million U.S. children participate in organized youth sports and bear a disproportionate burden of sports injuries. Over the past 2 to 3 years, high school student athletes have been impacted by heat-related illnesses and injury and cardiac arrest more than any other levels of play. The Jordan McNair Foundation strongly urges the passing of Senate Bill 638 primarily to help improve player safety, which is also a part of the foundation's mission. The reins need to be tightened on emergency action plans, heat acclimatization, and the trained use of automated external defibrillators and cold water tubs among all coaches, athletic directors, and trainers. Many injury and death incidents among high school student athletes had to do with the lack of developing an EAP for each athletic field or venue, failure to review the EAP, or too much time lapse between practices of the EAP. The emergency action plan is the equivalent to a fire drill. Fire drills occur so that everyone will know what to do in case of a fire. All coaches, athletic directors, and trainers need to read, understand, and more importantly, practice the EAP so that everyone will know their respective roles to help keep student athletes safe. We highly support the practicing of the emergency action plans in March or April before spring and summer practices, which is peak season for incidents, and again in August before fall sports practices and games begin. The passing of this bill is urgent, as we don't need any other student athletes dying while playing sports. We don't need another Jordan McNair or Elijah Gorham, who just died in October 2021 after an incident while playing high school football. On behalf of student athletes across the state of Maryland, we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 638 in order to improve player safety and help save the lives of the current and future student athletes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Treshaw, the mother of Elijah Gorham, and I thank you guys for having me. My son Elijah Gorham is an amazing young man. He started playing football when he was 3 years old. On September the 18th, he lied on the ground for 60 minutes. I'm sorry. I apologize. Again, my name is Sean Treshaw. My son is Elijah Gorham. He's an amazing young man. He started playing football when he was a young man. On September the 18th, he lied on the ground for 60 minutes without rendering any rescue attention to assist or by a certified athletic trainer to assist him for more than 60 minutes, waiting for the EMTs without any exit plan. I am a grandmother of 2. I have a nephew at City High School. I don't want this pain to wish upon any other mother. I'm begging you to pass this bill on the behalf of all the young men that love the sport and all the moms that love their sons from have a traumatic brain injury, and the future of all Elijah Gorhams. 7 strong.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw, and obviously our thoughts are with you in the loss of your son. Mr. Robinson?
Thank you. My name is Wes Robinson. I'm the past president of the Maryland Athletic Trainers Association, and I speak to you on behalf of them today. But I do want to say publicly thank you to Jordan's mom and dad for allowing me to be here with you all today. Athletic trainers are experts in the field of sports safety, and we are happy to lend our support to this bill as it hits upon a key component of our advocacy, athlete safety with a focus on prevention. The MAT is excited that the sponsors have been willing to work on and accept our recommendations to further strengthen the language around AED access and ensure venue-specific emergency action plans. Just having a plan is not enough. That plan needs to be exact, distributed, posted on site, and most importantly, rehearsed by everyone involved. If not, it is destined to fail. Even schools with an athletic trainer are at risk. One athletic trainer cannot provide crisis-level care by themselves. While that athletic trainer is performing CPR, who's calling 911? Who's going to get the AED? Who's unlocking the gate to allow the ambulance access to the field? All the coaches need to be well-versed in the emergency action plan. I've heard from too many of my colleagues that they have an AED at their school, but they have no access to it. It's locked in the nurse's office. They're not allowed to take it out to the fields. It's not available after school hours. This past year at Loyola Blakefield, a lacrosse player was struck in the chest and collapsed. There was an AED on the sideline, and the player was shocked in less than 2 minutes. That young man is alive today because of the quick actions of the sports medicine team and because the AED was on site and available. Had it been locked in the nurse's office, he would not have survived. Every athlete in Maryland should have that access to an AED and the adults in place to implement an effective emergency action plan. Athletic trainers have front row access to the excitement of sports. Unfortunately, we also bear witness to the tragedy of sports, the unnecessary and preventable death of a student athlete. It's an experience that no athletic trainer can fully prepare for, and no parent should have to endure. Our organization's goal and my personal mission is to ensure that we legislate as much safety as possible. We have to take every step available to avoid the human error and the poor planning that can lead to the loss of life and disability. Thank you for your time.
Let me ask you a couple questions. And again, you hate to have to act because of horrible situations and being responsive to a problem rather than being proactive. So we appreciate the idea of having a plan in place. And some of the testimony raised some particular concerns. And so I just want to throw out a few situations. And if we take the bill up, we're going to want to change it, tighten it up, make some suggestions. So just a few things. And if one of you can answer rather than all of you answering. I mean, I understand the inflatable tub in the summer practice for football when what exactly happened in Jordan and the heat temperature, internal temperature went so high. If a basketball team is practicing in December indoors, I mean, this says every practice you need an inflatable. I mean, that gets a little tough. And is the inflatable tub needed in January in a gym inside the school, for example?
Certainly, we've addressed.
I'm going to give you two of these. And at some point, we might ask you to come back with how to tighten it up.
Yeah.
You know, it says that the defibrillator should be at every practice. Well, I was a high school coach. You've got indoor track, you've got basketball, you've got 3 or 4 things happening at the same time in different parts of the school. Having more than one defibrillator maybe is a good thing, but schools are on limited budget. So there's some pieces here that, you know, I think one of the representatives said it might be a little one-size-fits-all, it doesn't quite work. I mean, the plan, I think, makes total sense. So I want somebody to answer the question about the details. And then the final question I have, and I think this is more for Mr. McNair, over the past year or two, have you found high schools particularly more willing to come along and make some of these changes? And that's separate from the need for this bill. I'm just curious to know what your response has been. But if, Mr. Moore, if you want to talk about the details of how this would work.
Certainly, thank you. And that was definitely a piece that we looked at was, you know, having an inflatable or a stock tank or a comparable piece of equipment set up at a basketball game in February is not realistic. And there's language added into the amendments that address wet bulb globe temperatures and or heat index specifics. And those guidelines are based off of the Corey Stringer Institute that formulates those boundaries, and then also similar to what we're developing with the MPSAA right now and revamping those guidelines as well. So that, I appreciate that concern, but that would be there. That we want those modalities to be available, because if there is a heat illness situation with a wrestler in February, right? That could happen. They're doing a difficult workout, whatever. It needs to be available. But no, we don't expect it to be set up at that time, but on those times when the wet bulb globe or ambient temperature or the heat index is such that it warrants it, yes, it should be set up and proactive available.
That's defibrillators at practices.
Correct. So that's a difficult situation, right? And again, it does come down to financial sometimes. But that's where we kind of leave some flexibility that this is needs to be addressed at the local school level situation. So, one school that has all of their facilities that are close together and that AED can be transferred from one location to multiple venues, that may be the best fit for them. Is it the ideal situation is what we want? No, but realistically, that may be what has to happen at that particular school. Another school that has, their football practice is 2 miles away and from where they're at, then yeah, they may need to be in a better situation and to take care of that and to have another AED available.
Again,
but the key there, I would say, though,
a lot of us haven't had a chance to look through the amendments.
Certainly.
Some of these are covered in the amendments?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. The key
Thank
there
you.
is being that if that AED is going to go from place to place, it has to be unlocked. It has to be accessible.
Understood.
Certainly.
And my other question, Mr.
Yeah.
McNair.
So basically, Mr. Chairman, the numbers of high school student athletes that have passed have been, I hate to say, use the word horrendous, but unfortunately, we in 2020, we lost about 18 to 19 student athletes across the country, high school, from heat stroke and the cardiac arrest. 2021 was even worse than 2020 because we lost 23 student athletes across the nation. We don't hear about it because it's not in our geographical location. But our foundation, we get frontline news whenever a child goes down. And it boils down to what's preventable. So to answer your question, is the buy-in what it should be? The majority of high schools have emergency action plans, but are they practice emergency action plans? Because at the end of the day, what we talk is prevention. But at the end of the day, if you don't have an EAP in place, it's the equivalent of a fire drill. We all know to run out of the exits here. But every time you walk out on that field, there's a potential for a fire. And that's where people need to be versed and practiced at that, to be prepared every time it does happen.
I should have called out Mr. Phillips. Is Douglas Phillips here?
I'm
No.
here. I brought my shot today. I'm actually unfortunately very sick today.
Did you want to add anything or not? Okay. Okay, other questions for this panel? Then Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hellman, thank you for this very important bill, and Ms. Shaw, Ms. McNair. It's very difficult to listen to this and to see you here as a parent myself, and I thank you for the strength that you show to really take this on to prevent this loss in other families. So thank you for that. As a former military member, I know we had annual training, an entire unit, all hands on deck, so to speak, with emergency action plans, EAPs, and CPRs, and just listening to a simple point is, if I'm there with someone to tell someone else to go call 911, you have to pinpoint someone directly to do that. And it's something that if we are putting our children on the fields, we must make sure that happens. So my question is, what percent, is it just a broad problem in the state where very few schools are doing this, or a lot are, but not enough? How would you quantify, or can you quantify, how many schools are or are not taking this seriously and actually trying hard to be prepared in case anything like this happened?
It's challenging to look across different groups, right, or different schools. I would refer back to, and I'm going to mess the number up, but I would refer back to the Corey Stringer Institute. Right now ranks each school, each state.
I'm sorry, which institute is that?
The Corey Stringer Institute.
Corey Stringer
Institute. Corey Stringer was an NFL player that died of heat stroke, I believe in the late 90s.
20 years ago, exactly.
20 years ago.
Yep.
And so the Corey Stringer Institute has been built through the University of Connecticut, and they've done a lot of research around heat and illness specifically, but they've also been a great advocate for EAPs and different things throughout the state. So they've basically gone through and ranked states based off of a numerical ranking of what does their legislation look like. And if you look at MPSA, well, first of all, when we get knocked down because we have a big divide between our public schools and our private schools. And so we would love to come to you and say, let's look at both. It's too big for this bill. But so one of KSI's knocks on Maryland is missing out on the public.
I'm sorry, you're using acronyms. KSI.
Is the Corey Stringer Institute.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll stop saying KSI. So Corey Stringer Institute ranks those schools, and I believe in this past year we were 35th out of 50 states based on their ranking, based on our legislative mandated procedures for school safety.
Okay. So 35 being a high number, which is not a good number.
Correct, 35 out of the 50 states.
So
Well,
being
51 with the District of Columbia.
So being so high is not a
High is not
thing.
good. We want to be number one. We want to be up there. And now, there are a lot of differences in Maryland. There are a lot of great things that the MPSA is doing that they're recommending. to be done.
MPSA?
MPSAA is the Maryland Public Secondary School Athletic Association.
Okay, thank you.
So they do a fantastic job of going forth and I'm not speaking on their behalf today, but they do a great job of recommending what they can do. They have a lot of great recommendations in place, but they're not mandated by law.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
where we get knocked down on some of those
good.
things. So
Yeah, I saw Ms. Shaw shake your head. Could you respond to that? Or use the mic, please.
I'm sorry. For the Baltimore City Schools, there are a lot of things that they can do a lot better for the students' athletics that can be done, such as my son, that what needs to be done. So for us, the athletic trainers that need to be certified, trainers need to be certified. That what needs to be done.
Okay, so they have trainers, but they're not certified.
They're not certified.
And that means they're ineffective, in your opinion?
So there's many schools throughout our state that don't employ an athletic trainer. And I'd love to have a whole nother discussion about that. I think that's obviously from our situation would be a great thing to advocate for. I think that's probably unfortunately beyond today's topic, but I'll sit here and talk to you all day about it if you want to.
No, we're done. Thank you so much.
Madam Vice Chair. Madam Vice Chair.
Appreciate your answers.
Senator Hedelman, thank you for this bill, and Mr. McNair, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that I was in another committee, and so I didn't get to hear all of your testimony. I have a brief question about the cost, because one of the things that I think a lot of us are conscious of is unfunded mandates and telling local governments or local school systems that they have to buy stuff or do stuff that is expensive. So I was just doing a search on the cost of an automatic external defibrillator, AED, and those are not so expensive, but different jurisdictions have different capacities to buy stuff than others. And I wonder, Senator or anyone, whether you're aware of any external funding source. I would think that, I'll name Under Armour just because they're Maryland-based, but I would think that, Nike and all those folks, Adidas, might have foundations that would fund stuff like this. And I wonder if there's been any investigation in our 911 work. One of my mantras was all boats have to rise together. And we don't want bigger, smaller, wealthier, or less wealthy jurisdictions to be advantaged or disadvantaged. And so that's my thinking here. I want to make sure that all schools, all athletes have access to working, technologically advanced devices. So I wonder, Senator or anyone else on the panel, if you have any knowledge of any other funding sources.
So I'll take a stab, and then some other folks on here might know. But I do know, I think Kestrel, right, was the name of the company that is donating
Kestrel
to
will-
high schools.
Correct. They will be donating
globe-
globe temperature.
The thermometers.
For every school in the state of Maryland.
For every
That
public
has-
school, they're going to be doing that, yes.
So we haven't explored the AED front yet, but it's a great idea. And again, like Mr. McNair said, every school property is different, and so they're going to have different needs for
Absolutely.
different numbers. But again, like, and this was a comment that the chairman made, the point, and in the amended version of the bill, it just says that you have to be able to access it with a 2-minute quick walk.
Right.
So that's going to vary from campus to campus, but, you know, maybe as part of this, we can do an accounting of how many are needed throughout, and then go and knock doors at some of those companies that might be able to be philanthropic in this way.
So my worry is that the cluster idea that makes a lot of sense that one of you mentioned doesn't work if one of the devices doesn't work, and they probably burn out and they're not caught up to date and all that, so we want to make sure that they are functioning as well as accessible. So
Absolutely.
I'm just going to say, Kevin Plank, if you're watching, Under Armour would be a great sponsor here.
Right, and absolutely, and they are battery operated, the batteries run down, but that is part of the emergency action plan pieces to
Right.
look at those, look at the equipment, make sure that you're checking those and everything's up to date. And I know that there are a couple companies, School Health is one, Medco is another, those are basically different groups that sell a lot of different medical equipment.
Yes.
And I know that this is certainly an advocacy piece for them as well, and they've worked with other school systems, maybe say, okay, this school system's gonna buy 10, so we're gonna get you at a reduced rate or something like that, instead of that individual school. So I think that there are avenues to explore in that regard.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing on that legislation. We thank you all for coming and sharing your information and experiences with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move to Senator Klausmeyer, Financial Literacy, Curriculum, Graduation Requirements, and Professional Development. She will be joined by Susan Bestranson, Rory Murray, and Robert Enton. I'm sorry. It is Senate Bill 699.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. It's great to be here today. And on this bill, this is not my first time. It's probably not my second time, might be my 5th time. And I get it. We don't want to, there's so many bills that are around, and we want the schools to teach what we think is important. But this is an important lifetime education for folks. So with that, I'll leave it at that. But the students in Maryland leave their schools with a lot of conceptual information about real-world financing, but little practical knowledge. Senate Bill 699 will address this issue by requiring students to take a semester-long course, just one, teaching them economics as well as personal finance. These students will be taught how to pay for education after high school, establish credit, save and invest money from employment, and many other crucial, very crucial financial tools that they may not be learning. And that goes to buying a car, buying a house, getting a credit card. And I think this is of utmost importance, and I really, really wish when I was in high school, I would have had one, because I'd be a much, much better bookkeeper of my own finances. I am accompanied by Susan Bestranson, who has been teaching financial education for years in Prince George's County Public Schools, and can explain how this class helps prepare students for the real world, and the rest of my panel will speak.
It's in Career in Tech Ed in Prince George's County Public Schools. You are, as the lead witness, you have up to 5 minutes. And I just want to apologize in advance. Okay, there we go. Chairman's back. Okay, thanks, Ms. Welcome, Ms. Bestranson.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Klausmeyer, for sponsoring this bill, and the committee for giving your time to listen. I am submitting my testimony in favor of 699. I've been a teacher in Prince George's County, Maryland, for 35 years. I'm a national board certified teacher, and I taught financial literacy as an elective course through the Family and Consumer Sciences Department for a really long time. Over the course of that time, I've been advocating very, very strongly, because I believe that financial literacy is the course that no student should ever leave high school without. I even wear it around my neck and have worn it for years. This is the most important course there is. When I tell people what I do, I haven't ever found anyone who disagreed that this is necessary to be learned about in high school. On the contrary, I have adults lament to me that, this wasn't required in high school. Why could I not have taken this? I was one of those people. I had to learn it the hard way. At age 35, I was faced with a divorce, crushing credit card debt, single parenthood, and a new job, teaching financial literacy to high school students. I learned the material along with my students that year and developed a lifelong passion for this incredibly important subject matter. Every citizen of Maryland should have financial knowledge before they leave high school and not have to learn the hard way. Currently, the MSDE requires 21 credits to graduate high school, and we want our students to be well-rounded. So in addition to math, English, social studies, and science, they have to take fine arts, technology, PE, health, world language, or CTE. Will any of those kids, when they get into their specific jobs, need to know how to handle money? Yes, every single one of them. Money is the common denominator that links all of us. Wherever you are from, rich, poor, in the middle, you need to know how to make your money work for you. So at this point, we have Maryland MSD has a great curriculum. It's updated regularly. The standards are outstanding. In 2011, it was mandated that all of these standards be taught. I'm sorry, not be taught, that they be offered, which is wonderful. But as an experienced teacher in the school system, I can tell you that if you ask for someone to offer it, it's not always going to go the way that you want to. At this point, most of our school systems are infusing financial literacy about 2 weeks into a social studies course. And I want you to think about this. The financial knowledge that you need to operate your life, could you learn it in 2 weeks at the end of a social studies class? It would be very, very difficult. In Prince George's County in 2020, we mandated a graduation requirement. Our class of 2024 is currently the first one that needs to have this course to graduate. We're doing great. The world hasn't come apart, and we have this mandate in our schools. We are not even using textbooks. We have superior online materials that provide us with engaging curriculum, certification for teachers, free professional development for teachers, and every tool that you could possibly imagine to make our teachers and our students successful in their financial lives. I always began my class with the same phrase. You are going to use everything I teach you in financial literacy every day for the rest of your life. Didn't sound like an elective to me, and that's why I worked so very hard in Prince George's County to get this mandated for graduation. I even had a student I met up with a few years back, a former student, who told me that he had moved out of the state after graduation. Things got a little ugly and not too great. He'd recently moved back into Maryland, and he said, I want you to know that I'm using everything you taught me in that budget course to set my life together. I really want you to know that. I thank you so much for it. So I say this and conclude that it is my sincere hope we no longer have to ask our students to move out and make bad decisions. We have the structure in place. Bill 699 allows school boards to make their own choices in choosing their programs of financial literacy. So I ask for a favorable report on 699.
Thank you. Either Mr. Murray or Mr. Enton, in whatever order you choose.
If I could just say very, very briefly.
Yeah, Bob, take the mic if you would, and lean into it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. We're really in very, very strong support of this legislation. We hear a lot and read a lot about bank deserts and people being underserved and not having access to banking services. And we think it's critical. In today's world, you go into a bank branch, it's mostly empty because people bank from their telephones, people bank from their iPads, and what's critical, and most people have a device, no matter where they live. And what's critical is for them to understand, what's available, how credit works, how bank accounts work, and that's the future. And we really, really do need to do that. I looked at the fiscal note. The fiscal note says that there's no increase at the state level in cost, and that local school systems likely increase by $2.7 million for 14 systems. That's $192,000 per school, per county. It seems to me that's a minimal amount of money in order to make sure that every student going forward understands the importance of their financial affairs. It's what dominates most of our lives. So that's why we support the bill, and we hope you'll give it a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anton. And finally, Mr. Murray.
Chairman, members of the committee, Rory Murray here on behalf of the Maryland DC Credit Union Association in support of this bill. Credit unions have always been very vocal supporters of financial literacy. Almost every credit union mission statement will have something to do with empowering their members through financial literacy and education. To what Mr. Enton just said and everybody else at the table, when you're first starting out your life coming out of high school, if you can't pretty much immediately manage your own budget, you're going to start off with pretty severe problems. One thing that the Credit Union Association has done over the years, at least pre-COVID, was financial literacy fairs. They call them reality fairs, and it's almost like a live game of Monopoly or a game of life. And in Allegheny County alone, over an 8-year period, we met with 6,000 students, and we would run them through this simulation. And while they had fun doing it, they would have to go get a house. They would pick their job, and we'd show them what the median income is for that job in their county. And then they get a house, then they get a car, then they get insurance, then they get all these things that they need. And while they enjoyed it, the one thing I always took away from it was a bit sobering. I don't think a lot of kids realize what their cell phone costs. If their parents are still paying it, they don't realize what car insurance costs. They don't realize how to balance a budget. They've never looked at their bank accounts because they either don't have a lot of money or their parents are still helping them out, what have you. But either way, a lot of them come up to me afterwards and ask where they can go for more help. And we always tell them, your local financial institutions will be able to help you, but you're going to need to know this by the time you graduate, because a lot of folks aren't going to go to college and have another 4-year buffer. They're going to go right into the work world. So we are in strong support of this bill. We hope it passes. Thank you.
Questions for the panel? Questions for the panel? Seeing none. We're pretty familiar
Thank
with the
you.
bill. Thank you for testifying. Ms. Bestranson, where do you teach in Prince George's County?
I taught for 10 years at Charles Carroll Middle School and then 25 years at Parkdale High School.
Great. You're still at Parkdale?
No, I'm now the program coordinator for financial literacy.
Great. Thank you very much for your service in the county. Thank you. That completes the hearing on 699. We're going to move to Senator Reedy, followed by Senator Hester. Senator Washington, could you come forward, please? Neiman joined the good senator. I see that must be. And Senator Hester will be on deck with Tanya Tiffany, and then we'll call Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I know we're all busy today, moving in and out of committees as we present bills, and so I'm appreciative of the opportunity and your attention to this issue. I'm here to present SJ 7, which is in support of parents' rights to bring grievances to county boards of education. This is really just a simple resolution that would have us, the General Assembly of Maryland, recognize the important right of any parent to address their local school board peacefully and in order, and not be kept from doing so by force, which of course would be unlawful, but also by subtle or overt intimidation. This is not, again, a new law. It's a resolution. As you all know, you're the committee that gets the resolutions. It's a strong statement of support for this right. Last year, we saw the Justice Department and Attorney General of the United States direct the FBI to look into disruptive parents as possible terror threats. I provided in my testimony some news sources and citations below. And while it appears nothing eventually came of it after a pretty large backlash, I think we should make it clear that we're on the side of open dialogue, transparency, and accountability, in our boards of education and in our school system. We've all come through a very difficult period of time with the pandemic, and schools became a very key focus of that, frustration and also trying to recover from learning loss. And parents, we want to empower and support parents' rights to make their voice heard. And so I would just ask for your support for SJ7. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll hear from your
Sure.
panel.
Hi, my name is Jim Lehman. I'm from Frederick County, and I lead an organization called Transparency in Education. It's been in development since probably the late fall, and it will be on full rollout in April when we launch our website. And let me just give you a little bit of background on that, and then I'll lead into my reasons for supporting SJ7. The reason that this program came about and caught on with a lot of momentum is because there was an overwhelming amount of concern among parents that they weren't able to have any clear view into what was happening in the Frederick County school system, into the curriculums, into the policies, into the classrooms, into the materials, and they felt that as though they needed some assistance in being able to get that. Not that it wasn't available, but it's difficult for them to get it with their schedules and just understand how the school system's being run now and what the plans are for it in the future. During the time that this has been under development, I've talked to literally hundreds of parents in small and large groups, and there's been a number of themes in their comments to me. One consistent thread through all of it, which was nearly universal, was the fact that they felt as though they were I'll say they were reluctant to air their grievances or their concerns in a public setting through committee meetings or through board meetings, because they felt as though there would be some sort of a repercussion to it, whether it was local and maybe their child might suffer in the school system, or whether it was something much more broad, as Senator Reedy was describing. They felt a sense of intimidation. And I didn't make any decisions about whether that was a legitimate concern or not, because it was palpable and real enough that I felt as though it needed to be addressed. The fact that they felt uncomfortable or even reluctant to get up and explain their positions once they were aware of what was happening in the school system, to me, just went directly against and conflicted with what should be happening in the school systems. If we want to build a collaborative relationship between the board, between the administrators, between whoever was out there, and the community in order to have a solid and healthy exchange about where our public education system was going in the county. But it was real enough that I felt it was important to look at this bill and to support it in great detail. Now, it's not a terribly complicated problem. People feeling intimidated and not able to feel comfortable enough. We tried to work around that problem for a little while by acting as proxies for some of the more high priority concerns. But that's only a temporary solution to something that can be solved fairly simply. And as I said, it's not a complex problem, but the bill itself is not complex either. It addresses the problem directly, and it applies a proactive message of support, if you will, to parents that says, we've got you guys, we'll cover you. We've got a piece of legislation that we put out there that says you can feel comfortable and you won't have to worry about those repercussions. If those concerns are big enough that they're going to keep you quiet, then it needs to be addressed. So I'll leave it at this. I think it would be a very, very welcome message to the parents of the 45,000 or so students back in Frederick County who want to know that they can come out and they can express themselves without any fear at all that there'll be a backlash. And I think that, as I've said earlier, will promote a much healthier dialogue and exchange of ideas and develop the school system and set the right example within the county throughout the entire population, the students, the parents, the residents, and I support it wholeheartedly.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lehman, for coming and your testimony, and thank you, of course, Senator Reedy. Are there any questions? Senator Riley?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Senator, the bill is awfully short and sweet. The last paragraph talks about that the copy of the resolution be forwarded to different groups. Do we have a association of boards of education in Maryland?
We do, yes.
Should this resolution also be directed to them?
I think that'd be a great idea.
You think this resolution should also be directed to the State Board of Education?
I do.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Reedy, thank you for this bill. It's a great bill. You know, I agree with everything in it. See, like, eyes moving like, okay, what was he up to?
I move favorable. If you want to move favorable on a vote.
Unfortunately, this is not a voting session.
I understand.
So, you know, being a student of history and being an immigrant and military guy, I mean, I did a lot of classes and studies in the U.S. Constitution. So I'm reading the synopsis here, rights to peacefully assemble, speak freely. Aren't all these in the U.S. Constitution?
Absolutely, absolutely. The right to peacefully assemble and address your grievances is. However, there are times where folks feel very intimidated. Again, this is not a new law. This is a statement of, really a statement of principle that we're putting our weight behind. Also, there are times that school boards and other types of governing bodies can use different sorts of ways of having rules to try to stifle input and debate and discussion. And this resolution doesn't get into trying to govern that, but it does make a very strong statement that it's the will of, if we were to pass it, it's the will of the General Assembly and the statement of the General Assembly that we should do everything in our power to facilitate and support parents speaking freely at a public school. Peacefully, of course, but freely.
Yeah, I understand that. And so we have that very powerful document, the U.S. Constitution.
It's under attack sometimes.
Why would we need a Senate of Maryland joint resolution to let folks know that they have these powerful rights to do all these things enshrined in our Constitution? So I'm just kind of
yeah. Well, I think anything we can do to point.
you,
I think we should point it out to people, but also again make it clear that your right to speak freely in public also includes a Board of Education meeting. And again, I mean, unfortunately, there were some people involved in trying to intimate that people speaking out were perhaps threats. And so I think it's good for us to respond and say, hey, no, the parents addressing a school board, they should absolutely do that and do it, within the order and within rules. But we just want to encourage that and strengthen and support that.
Thanks.
If I may just add to that, just from the direct comments that I've heard, and you're correct, this is all outlined very nicely in the First Amendment. But it's about the execution of that and how those rights are executed and supported by the bodies, the governmental bodies. And I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say that trust of governmental institutions is not it's at an all-time, mistrust, I should say, is at an all-time high. So people come out of this, rightly or wrongly, in a position that they know that if they want to express themselves, there'll be no backlash. So it is law, but it's also about making sure that we, in Maryland, take the extra step to make the parents feel comfortable enough to be able to come forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. And just building on what the Senator Ellis has said, it also would seem that, or I should ask about education. So you mentioned rightly or wrongly. So part of that as an elected official would be to educate our constituents that they have, fortunately we have these three branches of government. And if the laws that we pass are not being followed, then one takes that to the court. Absolutely. And so those are those things. But it was an interesting statistic. I listened to NPR, and they said that only 30% of Americans didn't know we had 3 branches of government. So I thought that was really very interesting, and it seems that we really need to do a lot of work on educating our constituents really about the executive, the legislative, and the role, because I do think it results in frustration if people don't understand those differences. But thank you so much for this
Thank you, Madam
piece of
Chair.
legislation.
The division of powers, separation of power is very important. I have a resolution on
Absolutely.
another issue about the state versus the federal government.
Sure, sure. It will continue to be something that we discuss in this great democracy where there's freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the bill hearing for, what is my number here, for Senate Joint Resolution 7. Next is Senator Hester, and we are going to talk about County School Technology Pilot Program. Senator Hester, do you have, oh, am I in the wrong, oh, did I skip one? Oh, is Senator Lee here? That's what I thought. Okay, great, thank you. Yes, we are fine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Katie Fried Hester from District 9. So here on Senate Bill 756, which I've sponsored on behalf of the Parent and Teachers Association of Howard County, this will establish a pilot program within the University System of Maryland to study school redistricting and use advanced data analytics and GIS. As many of you probably know, across the nation and across various counties in the state of Maryland, school redistricting can be a controversial topic. Where our children learn is important to both children and the parents themselves, and it's really difficult to make everybody happy. School boards face extremely difficult decisions to balance countervailing priorities while trying to keep as many of the families happy as possible. So this bill aims to try to assist the school boards in making decisions by studying how advanced statistical tools could reshape how redistricting is done. The pilot program established under this bill would begin by studying Howard County's redistricting process and identifying where applied data tools can be utilized to predict things such as the size of future pre-kindergarten classes and report the findings. Furthermore, if Howard County were to redistrict their schools, this pilot would conduct a parallel process to demonstrate the validity of its recommendations in real time. Colleagues, if Senate Bill 756 passes, it could provide a clear and translatable blueprint for school redistricting in other jurisdictions across the state, should they choose. It would demonstrate the utility of leveraging advanced tools to redistrict and make the process smoother for all parties. While this bill was brought to me by the Parent Teachers Association of Howard County, the Howard County school system has voted to support this legislation with some clarifying amendments. And Towson University's Division of Strategic Partnerships and Applied Research has indicated their interest in taking part in this pilot program. For these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 756.
Panel is Ms. Tonya Tiffany, is that you?
Yes.
Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for the ability to come in and speak to you. My name is Tanya Tiffany. I'm the Vice President of Issues for the PTA Council for Howard County. Our council represents the local PTA organizations all over Howard County. The origin of SB 756, which we are highly in favor of, is based on the crossroads of several major events that happened for the school system. Budgetary limitations for capital projects, and then a very contentious redistricting cycle, which I'm sure none of you understand at all, considering the redistricting that's going on in legal battles for you guys right now. But there was a public demonstration by the University System of Maryland that showed some capabilities that would really, really help. So the HCPSS Office of School Planning has recently updated its redistricting policy to include several new considerations and the formation of an analytical approach that they want to take. The next planning and redistricting cycle literally just begun today and follows a process that is newly defined in their policy 6010. The process includes the use of a consultant and commercial off-the-shelf software. This bill intends to support the long-term capabilities of the school system, not supplant them, and using USM assistance to address any areas of opportunity to gain efficiency within the framework of the policy. We believe that USM could help with using the analytical considerations factoring in unique polygons, capital budget variables, class size change impacts, implementation of blueprint for Maryland criteria, school facility index variables, walking distances facilitated by prioritized capital projects, land use policy affecting enrollment, exemptions to policies affecting growth patterns, new safety criteria, leased facility distribution, and much, much more. So in addition, there are opportunities to help mature the process to factor in real-time data as well as long-term trend analysis to the portfolio of capabilities. When this has been in the creation for several years, and every time that it has come up to vote before our council, with its membership of 73 schools, it has passed unanimously. There is full support by its PTAC and its membership for this bill. So thank you.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions? Senator Riley.
Thank you very much. Senator, this is a local bill, right? Only Howard County?
Only Howard County.
Very good. So of course I'll be extending local courtesy and I'll be supporting you.
Thank you so much, Senator
But
Riley.
I do have a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
So as a pilot program,
Yes,
4 years,
yes.
long time for a pilot.
Can you speak to that?
No, that's all right. No, that's fine. It just,
It is long for a pilot, but the feeling was that these things come in cycles, and you don't know exactly like when the next redistricting is going to be, and so that's why the 4 years is there.
okay, very good. The second thing is, and I should have asked this on almost every bill that has come before us, and it happens the year before an election. So if the bill passes, we have several years of forwarding funding for the next few years. Is it my impression that that funding can't be guaranteed because there's a change in administration? Or would this bill obligate the next governor to fund it?
That is a very good question.
Okay, so you don't have to
And-
answer it now.
Well, now that the bill is in the hands of the committee, we can work on our bill together.
No, I don't want to change it. I think it would help us, it would help you and your advocates to understand, because I think I remember, I've been around here 2 cycles now, I think I remember that there's a problem with guaranteeing future funding because of the change of administration. So maybe you can talk to somebody at B&T.
That's a great idea, Senator.
And, so that you're prepared if that issue comes up.
Thank you.
I have no problem with this. Good luck. I'll be supporting you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Madam Chair.
I have a question, and thank you for your testimony. You said that the school board supports this? They voted, so,
I believe they have some amendments that they would like to do.
well, no, I'm just wondering about, does Maryland need to grant authority for this to happen if you've already passed it? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is this not something that you can already do?
I believe that this is a funding request, more so than anything,
I
just
see.
to show, number one, that there's capability.
Right.
I think that was
But the school board could, or the county executive could fund it $200,000 a year if it was, it doesn't require state. You've answered it, yes, and you've answered that it doesn't require that. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Great. Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 756. Going to the next bill. Is Senator Lee? Great. Senator Lee, good to see you. Could you and do you have a panel with you?
No. I do
Okay,
not.
good. We skipped you.
Yeah, a
Okay.
lot of the witnesses have decided to submit it by written
Sure,
testimony.
Sure. Well, let me start the hearing.
Okay, thanks.
Colleagues.
It's because of
this-
COVID and some of the
Sure.
concerns they had about coming down
Sure.
here. but-
This is Senate Bill 888, and the bill is American Studies and Social Equity Standards and Advisory Board, Academic Standards and Model Policy. Again, yes, yes, you have written testimony, a number of pieces of written testimony, and I don't see, yes. So Senator Lee, please.
Certainly. Yeah, I had done this bill at the request of a House sponsor, Delegate Lily Chi. This is her, I brought this bill on her behalf. This is SB 888. It just merely established an advisory board for identifying ethnic and social groups whose contributions and perspectives are not often told in the Maryland Public School, American Studies. The board's intended to create a model policy on the studies of these groups to be adopted by the State Board of Education by 2025. And the bill is different than Senator Clarence Lamb and my earlier bill that I had presided before you all about a month ago, covering many groups of underrepresented groups of Americans in our history, but it hits about the same notes. And as I said earlier, I am cross-filed this bill at the request of the House sponsor, Delegate Chi. And there were some promises made initially about sponsoring an Asian American curriculum bills, but there were differing strategies to achieve success, and this is the most nuanced of the bills, and perhaps probably one of the most challenging. The other bills offer fewer guardrails on the curriculum development. This is more focused. This effort is based on data obtained after requests about the curriculum in local schools in which 14 jurisdictions responded about Asian American history taught in their particular jurisdiction. Some of the feedback included lessons on Indian or Chinese history as if the concept of an Asian American was not understood. We found limited guidance on Asian American history in the United States high school curriculum. Middle school frameworks only makes mention of this group in bridge units whose purpose is to mention geographic expansion on rights for African Americans, Chinese immigrants, and the political and legal rights of women. High schools simply touch upon economic consequences of World War II on these groups, but again, at the granular level of what local school systems actually teach about these groups, it's unclear if they cover these topics in depth. Different from other curriculum bills we heard this year, this bill creates an advisory board to examine current academic standards related to United States history. This examination is meant to identify omissions of pertinent historical contributions or voices of ethnic and social groups. To clarify, ethnic group means a non-dominant racial or ethnic group to include groups who identify as indigenous and are African, Asian, Pacific Islander, Hispanic, Latino, or Middle Eastern descent. Social group means women, and those with disabilities, members of the LGBTQIA community, immigrants, and refugees. Upon identification of omission, the board is meant to create academic standards for each grade level to increase exposure to these groups. This inclusion is meant not to expose children to not only to expose our kids to the contributions and perspectives of these important groups who make up much of Maryland, but to also allow the students to be introduced to groups whom they likely interact with while in Maryland. Model policy is to be created that allows for the teaching of social and ethnic groups that allow for a safe environment for students. The safety is paramount as schools work to combat biases and challenge assumptions. The model policy shall include maintenance of communication with parents so that parents may voice concerns related to experiences of their students based on race or social identity. Parents' religious and cultural concerns are intended to be heeded when crafting a model policy. And finally, the model policy is to be created to ensure that faculty are trained in the best practices related to racially motivated incidents. Any conduct based on ethnic or social groups is to be dealt with in accordance to appropriate model policy approved disciplinary action. Makeup of the advisory board is also laid out in this bill to reflect the diversity of Maryland. In addition to the heads of education departments, agencies, and organizations, vacancy procedures outlined to ensure the board remains representative of the state demographics and does not become over or underrepresented of any community. For these reasons set forth, we ask a favorable report on SB 888. questions.
Thank you very much, Senator. Very well thought out and complete bill. Thank you. Any questions? Senator Riley.
Thank you very much. Senator, thanks for bringing this bill forward. On the board, there's no legislators.
No, there are not.
Any specific reason that you didn't want them included?
No, if you want to amend this bill to put them on, would you like to serve on it, Senator Riley?
I think that's a yes. I think that's a yes. Senator Ellis.
Did we hear your answer about serving on the board?
He's getting himself in trouble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Lee, for this bill. So this is another bill in the space that you brought.
One of three bills.
One of three bills
yeah.
in this area. And other members of this body brought bills addressing this issue. So in your opinion, why would these bills be necessary? Is it that we have too much of multicultural diversity in the schools, or not enough, or none? What's your assessment?
Thank you for that question, Senator. You know, the history of America is incomplete without telling the history of all people of all different backgrounds, especially those who built America and contributed enormously to what America is right now. And sometimes their history is not told, and we just want to expand, at least have the opportunity to have history that tells everybody's history, because we're one country, and we're all one, and we should know how everyone made a significant contribution to our country. We just want to lay out have the opportunity to lay out the information, and then the students can make their own decisions about, as long as they have all the information before them.
Okay, so thank you for that. So you're saying, if I interpret you correctly, Maryland is not teaching these things right now in its public schools?
Well, based on the evidence from the House sponsor who worked very diligently on this to find out from, I believe it was 14 jurisdictions in our state, to find out exactly what they were teaching. And they found out that there was a large amount of underrepresentation of population groups that, the history was not being told.
Yeah, for instance, I mean, we put the burden on the teachers to teach all this, but what level of responsibility, say, belong with parents and guardians? For instance, taking their children to a museum, like my family went to the Museum of African American History and Culture, and there was an exhibit that talked about back in the 1800s, like 80+% of the GDP, that's gross domestic product of this country, came off the backs of the slaves. 80% of the wealth created in that period of time was through slave labor. And I never saw that in a textbook or anything like that. So the thing is do we want to put too much on the schools to do this, or should the parents be taking their kids to these museums and stuff and giving them the books to read? And
well, I think there should be both. I think it's up to the parents. So we can't tell the parents what to do. But at least we can provide a school curriculum that at least gives that information so that we have a complete history, a complete record of what happened in this country, such as those who built this country, like, for instance, the United States Capitol was built by enslaved individuals. And I don't know if that story has been ever told. The railroads were built by Americans of Chinese descent. That wasn't told. Let me tell you about my own personal experiences. I did not learn about my own Chinese American history until I went to college, and I took an elective course, and I found out all these things about what Chinese Americans did, what Asian Americans did to contribute to this wonderful America that we have today. And also other ethnic groups that have also, been responsible for major innovations that have changed in technology and medicine that perhaps were not ever mentioned. But, it's always good to have more knowledge than less knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Lamb, and also I think, Senator Hester, I think you have a question because it seems like you raised something similar to what this bill is about? You want to take a look, because I'm going to ask you to ask a question.
Yeah, just
Yes,
briefly, wanted to follow up on Senator Ellis's question. So this bill is broader. It identifies a few ethnic groups in here that the advisory board should look at, but it's not tailored to a specific advisory or
yeah.
specific ethnic group,
That's
right?
what I believe, so, according to the sponsor.
And then it allows the advisory board to really kind of set up some guidelines and guideposts as to what should be suggested to be included in the curriculum. It's not prescriptive in the bill itself.
No, my understanding, it's not prescriptive. And then there's got to be a cooperation between the state and the localities, too.
Got it, okay. But defers a lot to the advisory board, too.
Yes, yes, correct.
All right, thank you.
Senator Hester. Because I could ask it if you don't remember. Okay, good. So when we had the bill last time, the question was raised exactly, how do we make decisions about, over time, what's considered required learning? And we do that in the areas of chemistry, STEM, mathematics, but there's not a process where we evaluate what does a child in 2022 need to know about their history. So it seems that what this bill is setting up to do is to have that process happen. Would you characterize it that way?
Yeah, I think so, at least as a first step forward,
yeah.
because it's creating an advisory board to
Yeah, and
give
it's not
advice.
requiring-
It's not prescriptive, it's just a board, and I believe that there's no compensation for this board.
Yeah.
But it does, it's a board that reflects a huge diversity of our population in demographics in Maryland.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
just
just
think-
giving the advice.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
all.
And just more broadly, in history, and I guess I'm just saying this for our board, not just this topic, but broadly social science, broadly history, what is that process by which we try to figure out what do our children need to learn? I shared that fact about a third of our population doesn't know that there's 3 branches of government. That has tremendous impact on our democracy. So I guess asking those types of questions. So does anyone have any other questions on the bill? And was that your question, Senator Hester? Yes, it was. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Senator
Madam
Lee.
Chair, and thank you, esteemed committee members.
Okay, that is the end of Senate Bill, the hearing for Senate Bill 888. Okay, I'm still in. Senator Carrozza. More curriculum. Curriculum Transparency and Publication Act. Thank you. And please have your members come in. Is that Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Okay, welcome. All right, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Senator Mary Beth Carrozza, proud to represent Somerset, Worcester, and Wycomico counties. And I present to you today the Curriculum and Transparency Publication Act, SB 786. And the simple intention of the bill is to increase curriculum transparency for parents, taxpayers, and the general public. We as a society continue to recover from the pandemics on all fronts, health, economic, and social, with both short-term and long-term implications. One positive development from the pandemic has been the number of parents who have become actively engaged in their children's education as virtual learning became the norm. As parents became more involved in assisting their children with virtual learning, it is natural that parents would want more information about their children's schoolwork, including their interest in their children's curriculum. Senate Bill 786 is in an effort to take the next step to increase curriculum transparency by requiring each public school to post the curriculum on the school's publicly accessible website. I want to recognize the leadership and commitment of school personnel in making the extra effort to provide a quality education for all students and in being responsive to parents and others when questions are asked about curriculum and other education-related issues. We on this committee are aware that some Maryland school systems are posting general coursework information on their system's website, like my own home county of Worcester. My bill has been introduced to increase curriculum transparency by requiring the curriculum for each school to be posted publicly accessible to include instructional materials, not individual lesson plans, assessment techniques, internet links for or the name of a textbook, and course syllabi, without it being an undue hardship on school personnel. I believe the technology is available to allow this information to be posted publicly without being overly burdensome. Representatives from various parent coalition groups from across the state support SB 786. And my committee members, they actually wanted to testify in person. But out of respect for this committee's time, we encourage them to submit written testimony, which you have. In the written testimony, and one of the leaders of the Delmarva Parent-Teacher Association, Darren Lombardo, he's an IT professional and web developer with over 30 years of experience. And in his testimony, he writes, "A parent and taxpayer have every right to know what's being taught in their public schools. They should be able to find out without having to file a Freedom of Information Act or a Maryland Public Information Act. This committee may know that each school system staffs a director of curriculum, and they include curriculum assistants. So it could be their job to work to post this information on the website, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so it would not be a heavy burden on staff or administration." My witness today is Amy Adams, and I want to thank her for personally coming down. She's the mother of 3. She's a leader of a grassroots advocacy group from Baltimore County, and as I mentioned, there were several more from across the state that wanted to be here. I do believe that there is a way, my colleagues and friends, to post more information on the curriculum without it being overly burdensome for our school personnel. And I ask for the committee to consider the best way to do that. And I ask to work with you and move for a favorable report on Senate Bill 786.
Thank you, Senator. I was thinking you were coming from the Eastern Shore, so I was going to say thank you for traveling so far, but happy to hear you from Baltimore County. Please.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Senator, for introducing this bill, and thank you to the committee members for allowing me to speak today in favor of SB 786, the Curriculum Transparency and Publication Act. For the record, my name is Amy Adams. I am a parent of 3 school-aged children in Baltimore County. I am a daughter of a 30-year special educator, and I worked as a psychiatric nurse prior to starting my family. I am also one of the leaders of a grassroots advocacy group called the Baltimore County Parent and Student Coalition. Over the last 2 years, we have connected and collaborated with similar parent groups in 20 other Maryland counties. One benefit of virtual school experience was that parents got a window into schools, classrooms, and learning. In a word, transparency. We got to see what our kids were learning, what teachers were teaching, and how schools were using their time. Perhaps the thing I heard most often from other parents over the last 2 years, and I occasionally thought it myself, is, I had no idea. We had no idea one teacher was so organized. We had no idea our child was so confused about a specific concept, or how much or how little learning actually occurs in our child's school day. After watching my younger 2 struggle, I started by writing to their teachers and then to administrators in the curriculum departments and then to board members asking for more information about specific recent curriculum changes. I noticed a shift in curriculum over the span of my 3 kids' school experience. Currently, they're in 11th, 8th, and 5th grades. The change in curriculum, or the ways in which foundational skills were being taught, negatively affected my children's success, and I was curious why. I looked at the Maryland report card and saw that academic proficiency rates have been declining across the state for years before the pandemic. I then became a very active participant in board meetings, committee meetings over the last 2 years. I and the members of our group are actively invested in making our schools successful because it will directly benefit our children. I've been told that a summary of curriculum is available online. BCPS calls this a year at a glance. I've also been told that detailed curriculum information is unable to be shared because it is protected as intellectual property. Changes to curriculum are discussed in committee meetings that occur during the workday a couple of times each month. Rarely are these changes communicated clearly to parents or brought to the full board meetings that are held in the evenings. Most parents are not opposed to changes in curriculum, but they want to be informed when they occur and provided an opportunity to ask questions. A couple of weeks ago, I testified in favor of a similar House bill that was specific to Baltimore County. Representatives of the BCPS School Board who opposed the need for legislation to promote curriculum transparency stated that our county already had this available on the public website. When the committee members looked at the website during that very meeting, it was discovered the website was mostly blank. BCPS explained that the holes in the information was not available was due to the ransomware attack that occurred in November 2020. Since that meeting, more content has appeared online, but it does not include subjects for each child's grade and what they're enrolled in, unique topics with identified textbooks, approved online programs, or websites. I appreciate the intent of this bill is not to burden classroom teachers. Their primary role in the classroom is so vital to the success of our students. We are not asking for daily lesson plans to be published. That type of detailed information is available to parents through their Schoology accounts. We think it's a reasonable expectation in a world where almost everything is available online for the very qualified and knowledgeable administrators to oversee the online publication and up-to-date curriculum. Strong schools create strong and thriving communities. Passing this bill would allow a stronger partnership between schools and parents. There is a great power in this kind of openness. It can strengthen school communities, allow parents to see what's happening in their children's school classrooms, and provide students more of the support they need. SB 786 is our way to keep the transparency gained during remote school and build upon it. Taxpayers, parents included, should be able to review what public schools are teaching. This sounds simple, but without this bill, our state has made it difficult for taxpayers to access this material. Policies that require parents to physically visit a school district's office to see the school's reading list, or that limit times of the day in which someone can access the material, or encourage them to file a formal FOIA or PIA request are obstacles to civil engagement. I ask for a favorable consideration of Senate Bill 786 to strengthen curriculum transparency across the state of Maryland. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Ms. Adams. Questions for Senator Carrozza or Ms. Adams? Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this thoughtful bill, Senator Carrozza. So in listening to your testimony, in your presentation, you mentioned that this bill would not require the schools to provide that lesson plan. So the lesson plan is the daily plan of the teachers, what they will go through. So this bill will not require that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you want like the curriculum. So I'm looking at the Maryland State Department of Education website, and it has like state standards and frameworks and say social studies. And it says the framework provides the foundational knowledge and skills. And I go down and I look at, you can click on from kindergarten all the way through the high school level. And I click on grade 1, and it talks about social studies framework, grade 1, and it talks about the standards and says something like, description of the standards, students shall inquire about historical development of the fundamental concept and process of authority, power, and influential. So it talks about it, the framework of the curriculum, and I would think that the schools would take this framework and the teachers and develop the lesson plan eventually. So you really don't want the lesson plan, but it seems like the actual curriculum is there online, readily available for each one. When I click it on, I just get them. I don't get a blank page or anything like that. So I'm not kind of sure exactly what else would be required with this bill, if you could clear that up for me.
Sure, and thank you for the question.
Sure.
There's general information posted on the individual school system's website, and I specifically noted, my home county of Worcester County. I think what we found, and I think what Ms. Adams testified, is when you try to, when a parent, taxpayer, general public tries for that next level of detail, that has not been available. And there should be a way, and again, I'm not a techie, but from talking to those who work on the curriculum, there should be a way that we can provide more detail on the individual school sites without it being an undue burden for that school personnel. Because I do want to make clear that is not the intention of the bill. So when some of these conversations I know have already started, I spent some time with my own local school superintendent talking about what they already post, but what might be helpful. And again, I think when Ms. Adams outlined the challenges she had on just trying to seek that next level of detail for her child's curriculum, that there were a lot of obstacles to try to access that information.
Right, and so thank you for that answer, Senator Cruz. So I'm digging deeper into the Maryland publicschools.org, which is the state education department. And so it gets down to like a unit question. How can I be a responsible citizen? It goes into these detailed indicators, and so you can go really deep in these areas. So I'm not sure, but anyway, I'll talk to you.
Do you want to?
May I just answer briefly?
Maybe
Briefly.
Ms. Adams.
Okay, briefly. So during the pandemic years, BCPS purchased 9 new reading curriculums, and we don't really understand how the teachers were given professional development to certification in that, how those will be implemented in the classroom. So I'm not saying that parents need details in curriculum programs that are purchased, but it would be helpful to have specific local information in more detail, so when we're trying to seek and help our students, that we have more access to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your testimony. And there's no other oral testimony favorable or against. Clearly, there are many written submissions, both for and against, and I encourage people to read that at their leisure. Thank you for coming and your patience. That concludes the hearing on 786.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I took your advice and limited my witnesses so there would be written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to move to the final bill of the day. Senator Eckert, Health Services, School Nurses. We're going to start with Senator Eckert. Ms. Elliott, I think, is a lead witness. You should join her if you would. And also Nancy Austin and Christy Chmar. And then we have a lot of other people. They'll be followed by Caroline Kemp, Sahani Chitalia, Michelle Simmons, Ann Seacott, Scott Tiffin, and Peggy Bird. Some of you can be in the first row, and we will, if the senator has the time, we'll try to get through all the witnesses and take questions if you don't mind. With that, Senator Eckert, welcome back to EHE.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Pinsky. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Senator Addie Eckert here, District 37, actually Dorchester, Caroline, White Comico, and Talbot counties. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today on behalf of the school health nurses. And this bill is real simple. It just says there shall be a registered nurse in every school in this state. This is kind of a little bit of a provocative bill, and you probably wonder why here and why now. But as you can imagine, having experienced the pandemic, not only with the nursing shortage, but the increase in sensitivity to the health needs of our students, this is a great time to begin this conversation. It is long overdue. Years ago, when I was president of the Maryland Nurses Association, there were ongoing issues with school health nurses then. And I don't think we ever and that was back in the 80s, we've ever had a really good conversation about what constitutes school health nursing in the state. As you know, as it stands right now, it's up to the local jurisdiction to determine how school health services are provided. Many of our jurisdictions hire nurses through the local health department, and those health department nurses then work in the school health suite. Other areas have their nurses hired under the Board of Education, and then they employ the nurses. And each county has their own model for doing this, and that's great, but there is not a consistent level of delivery of nursing services in those areas. And we know that with the increase in chronic illness within our student population, we know that with the increase of special needs children who need extra attention and very complex behavior issues, it's time that we add a professional nurse in every school, in every county. So I will now turn it over to our witnesses so that you can hear firsthand some of their experiences. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Robin Elliott. I'm here today representing the Maryland Nurses Association in strong support of this bill, and thanks Senator Eckert, and feel is so appropriate that our nurse legislator is sponsoring this bill. We view this bill as being very foundational. A lot of the work that this committee does involving behavioral health, ensuring kids are healthy enough to remain in school. You have multiple bills every year on medication administration. At the core, we think that there needs to be a nurse in every school. You'll hear today, and we're very lucky, I might add, that we have 2 school nurses here because they are so busy right now. And I'm just really appreciative of them finding the time and being able to cobble together other support so that they could be here today. But school nurses are so important right now, and they always have been. They deal with students with complex medical conditions. Some of those students have IEPs. They really need to be there full-time. They deal with students with chronic conditions. We know that at least 25% of students, it's a growing number, have some kind of chronic disease like diabetes, hypertension, obesity. Of course, we've all heard and know very closely about what is happening with the mental health of our youth. And then we need school nurses to deal with emergencies. Today, you'll hear from nurses that are split between different schools. And we'll also hear of the experience of what it's like when one nurse is assigned to one school. The National Association of School Health Nurses does recommend that there be a full-time nurse in every school. The reason is that nurse can form relationships with those students who then can turn to the nurse when they need support. It's also, you need a nurse there all the time for medical emergencies and for medication administration. So with that, I will yield some of my time back to the committee and ask for a favorable report.
Okay, I am going to have to address an issue on Senator Lee's bill. An individual who was unfavorable was inadvertently left off. And rather than have her sit through 10 witnesses on this bill, I'm going to ask Lori Halverson, if you're still here, to take a couple of minutes. And so we're going to pause on 8:56. Don't go anywhere, Senator Eckert. And we're going to have Ms. Halverson, who we overlooked, on 888. So please.
Thank you, Senator Pinsky. I strongly oppose Senate Bill 888. This bill is discriminatory, illegal, and an example of over-legislating what our school systems are already doing without more legislative interference. I will mention 3 of the 6 reasons that I wrote in my testimony for opposing this bill. Social equity is not defined. How can advisory board advise without a thorough definition on what social equity is? The definition online often states that the social equity means equal access to both opportunities and outcomes. If the intention is to expect all students to have equal outcomes, the authors of this bill are choosing to suppress high and moderate achievers so that they can equal the lowest common denominator in educational outcomes. Excellence in education was once a goal in Maryland, but the supporters of this bill feel differently. Equity for all is not excellence. SB 888 is a discriminatory and illegal bill. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, yet this bill recommends that standards be based on the definition of ethnic groups, which include every race except Caucasians, and every combination of humans in the social group definition except for white heterosexual male U.S. citizens. The third reason is the makeup of the advisory board is racially and sexually biased against Caucasian American males and females. Its members are classified according to race, skin, color, and sexuality. The bill specifies that the members chosen in the advisory group must have a history of advocacy for their particular ethnic group. I can think of a number of people from the African descent who fall in the conservative category and advocate for the human race, not on behalf of a certain race. You would be excluding them from participating on this advisory board. Did you mean to exclude conservative black men and women? Current state and local curriculum policies already address the importance of prohibiting racism and promoting diversity.
Ms. Halverson, you have to wrap up.
Yes, please withdraw this bill today. It will achieve nothing but more headaches for educators and will not improve student achievement in education. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to revert back to Senator Eckert's bill. We heard from Ms. Elliott, who was very kind and not use all her time. Now we're going to move in whatever order you choose, Nancy Austin or Christy Chamar. Please begin.
Okay, I'll go first. Good afternoon. My name is Nancy Austin, and I am a school community health nurse employed by the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. I currently provide nursing support to 2 schools that are a 20-minute drive apart. We have seen a huge increase in mental health concerns in school. The first place those students come to is the health room. Stomach aches, headaches, avoidance, and frequent visits can be symptoms of concern. It's okay in a safe place to come to the health room. It is then the assessment of the nurse that is most important. Diabetes is a prevalent and complex disease. With the help of technology such as continuous glucose monitors and insulin pumps, a student can also avoid some of the long-term complications of heart disease and kidney failure. Having a nurse in the school is the best and safest way to use the technology and monitor these students. I work in zip code 20876, home to the most diverse population in Montgomery County. I live and work in a county with 1.1 million residents, 208 schools, and 159,000 students. Working in a single school building would allow me to establish relationships, to better know the school community, and to develop an understanding of local resources. Recently, there were 2 911 calls at the same time at one of my assigned schools. The emergencies occurred 8 miles from where I was sitting. I could not be on site to assist because of the distance and because I was the only on-site trained staff for a very young student with diabetes, so I couldn't leave. Students and parents really do deserve better. We see and care for medically fragile students every day. The health accommodations afforded by a 504 plan or individual education plan all start with a health care plan. No matter how many professionals are involved in accessing education for this student, it all begins with a registered nurse, the only one who can write a health care plan. Thank you, and I support Senate Bill 856 for a nurse in every school.
Thank you, Ms. Austin. Before I go to Ms. Chamar, I'm going to break my own rule. I have one very quick question for you. Of the 208 schools in Montgomery County, how many have their own registered nurse?
I would say about 38. Our high schools tend to. If we can, right now, we have hemorrhaged nurses, and so some of those people have had to pick up an extra school.
Okay, so 38 have full-time RNs.
Right now,
out
the
of
high
100
schools.
Out of 208. Okay, thank you. Christy Chamar.
Good afternoon. My name is Christy Schmar, and I'm currently a school nurse in Worcester County. I transitioned from hospital nursing and outpatient care into this role 3 years ago, as I felt it would be positive for my home life as my children would be attending the same school that I took the position in. I was also in the process of acquiring my doctorate to become a nurse educator, and admittedly believed that the pace would be more manageable than what I had become accustomed to in the hospital. I had an antiquated vision of what my job would consist of and shared the common misconception that I would only be giving out a lot of Band-Aids and ice packs, which I do, in fact, along with the expected daily medications. However, I was quickly humbled about how extensive the role truly is. Not to mention that a pandemic began the year I was hired, which obviously shed light on how much a school nurse is needed and depended on. But even without that, which is a whole other meeting entirely, I learned that school nurses must be able to provide a comprehensive list of care and services. For the interest of time and to reduce redundancy, I won't go through that list right now. But according to the CDC, school nurses not only make a big difference for student health and academic achievement, but they can save money. Research shows that for every dollar spent on school nursing, society saves $2.20. These savings come from preventing costly emergency room visits and parents missing time at work to care for sick children. It's also stated that many school-aged children and adolescents have at least one chronic health condition, such as asthma, diabetes, seizure disorders, food allergies, and poor oral health. But rather than reading you lists and statistics, I would like to provide you with examples that have occurred within the school, even as recently as last month. We've had middle-aged students overdose on medications from parents' home medicine cabinet, which resulted in the need for Narcan administration. That ultimately saved her life. We have performed Heimlich removers on children that were choking, administered epinephrine for bee stings and food allergies, and are prepared to respond to anything and everything that may come our way during our vigilant watch on a typical school day. To expand on that further, we also serve as unofficial media care centers where faculty and staff frequent as well. An example that comes to my mind during my brief tenure as a school nurse was when a faculty member came to my health room in duress with cardiac symptoms that I was able to assess and guide toward receiving prompt care. If in fact they had come to me later in the progression of their symptoms, I would be the one to perform CPR and or operate the AED on premise. In conclusion, I would like to leave you with one of my new favorite quotes that I have proudly displayed in my health room, which is, students must be healthy to be educated and educated to be healthy. School nurses help to ensure that both of these occur and quite simply illuminate how important it is that each school system be at every building. Thank you.
Okay, if the three of you could sort of step back to the first row, we may have questions for you momentarily, but I want to get through the other 5 or 6 witnesses. Please stay, Madam Senator. Let's bring up Carolyn Kemp, Sahana Chitalia, and Michelle Simmons. And then if people in the on-deck row, Ann Seacott, Scott Tiffin, and Peggy Bird. Please, begin in whatever order you choose. Just start with giving, we're being streamed, so we want for the record your name.
Good afternoon. My name is Caroline Kemp. I'm a nurse practitioner and a Doctor of Nursing Practice student. My capstone project has been a policy analysis on school-based mental health services. Based on my research, including interviewing school nurses in different states, I have found that school nurses are an essential component to combating the mental health crisis facing our youth today. Even before the pandemic, mental health concerns were the leading cause of disability and poor life outcomes in young people. The mental health crisis has now been compounded by the pandemic. In December, the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued an advisory to highlight the urgent need to address this crisis. In his State of the Union address last week, President Biden called the nation's mental health crisis a priority for his administration. The psychological costs of the pandemic will continue to persist for years to come, especially with the concurrent rise in social media use, with students as young as kindergartners getting smartphones. The role of the school nurse is more crucial than ever. Nurses are trained to use critical thinking and look at the whole child, including both physical and mental needs. So often mental health concerns have physical symptoms as well. School nurses are sometimes the first to notice mental distress through somatic manifestations, such as headaches, dizziness, nausea, or signs of self-harm. When nurses are rotating between schools or not present daily, other staff members must fill in with triaging medical or mental health issues, which can be very dangerous. Placing a nurse in every school will alleviate that burden from overworked teachers and staff. Having a full-time nurse in every school would improve the effectiveness, efficiency, and equity of mental health care for our youth. Maryland should be a leader in the United States and put a nurse in every school. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kemp. Ms. Chatalia?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky, Senator Eckhart, and members of the Education, Health, and Environment Affairs Committee. For the record, my name is Suhani Chatalia. I am here on behalf of the Maryland Dental Action Coalition. The Maryland Dental Action Coalition's main goal is to create partnerships and improve the health of all Marylanders through increased oral health promotion, disease prevention, education, and advocacy around oral health care. The Maryland Dental Action Coalition supports good policies that will protect overall health, particularly for children. Cavities are one of the most common diseases, and I'm sure everyone here has in some way heard of or supported a child who has had cavities. Unfortunately, I was one of them far too many times. It's the most common disease afflicting a student population. About 20% of children between 5 and 11 years old have at least one untreated cavity. The most practical way to combat cavities is through dental sealants. The Maryland Department of Health runs the Mighty Tooth Program, which is the state's school-linked dental sealant program. School-based dental sealant programs are extremely important to enhance screenings, education, and dental sealant applications in a school setting. Dental teams are set up in gyms, auditoriums, unused classrooms, and even nurses' offices. For this to happen, school nurses are essential as they support the program to run efficiently, and nurses champion this program through their coordination and implementation. School nurses are key to ensuring students are receiving basic dental care and are participating in preventative care to avoid diseases such as cavities. With this, we urge a favorable report on this bill, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Simmons?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson, members of the committee, and Senator Eckhart. My name is Michelle Simmons, and I'm a current student at Coppin State University in their nursing program. I'm also the single mother of an 11-year-old son who's asthmatic, and he also has multiple food allergies. So I'm really passionate about this bill because my son has been the recipient of a school nurse on several occasions when he comes in contact with an allergen. Most of the time, for his contact, he's had an anaphylactic reaction, and so the nurse was able to administer his EpiPen and also stabilize him before the ambulance got there and take him to the emergency room. Also, during my final year, in my clinical rotation as a part of my curriculum, I'm paired with a community and school nurse who is overseeing more than one location, and I've had the opportunity to go with her to multiple locations, which was really very taxing because once we administer the medication to one student at this location, we had to drive approximately 25 minutes back to the other location to give another student their medication. And then once we returned to her school for which she's assigned, we had students waiting and also have to be there on time to administer other medications. So I just wanted to go ahead and let everyone know that I'm in total support of this bill, not only because my son was a recipient, and not only because the school nurse benefited greatly my son and the services she provided, but also because I see it as a necessity. And I just wanted to ask respectfully for a favorable return on this bill. Thank you.
Ms. Simmons, and we're going to have one more group, and then we'll open up for questions. Let's have Ms. Seacott, Mr. Tiffin, and Ms. Byrd come forward, please. And you may proceed in whatever order you choose.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'll start just because I'm here. Ann Seacott, I'm here today testifying on behalf of the Maryland chapter of the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Registered nurses are not experts in substance use disorders. They are not necessarily experts on mental health. But what nurses are the front lines. And when you have a nurse in a school on a daily basis, the nurse can help identify patterns that may indicate a mental health problem or a substance use problem, and be able to, they're very well trained to identify that kind of thing, and then be able to make an appropriate referral. Certain behaviors may be indicative of other things. They may manifest as a stomach ache or a headache or something like that, but they're really about something else. And so we strongly support making sure there is a nurse in every school who can actually help as with triaging and identifying these patterns and referring kids to the services, the additional services in the community that they really need. Thank you.
Scott, it's nice having you back at EHE.
Lovely to be here.
Please.
Good afternoon. My name is Peggy Bird. I'm a registered nurse and the school nursing program manager for Charles County. Staffing every school with a registered nurse represents the ideal scenario. This position is supported by the National Association of School Nursing, which maintains that a professional registered school nurse be present in every school all day, every day. If your last encounter with a school nurse was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, or even the 80s, you are probably picturing Nurse Ratched bandaging paper cuts or handing out peppermints. Rest assured, those days are gone. Currently, chronically ill and medically fragile students attend every school in Maryland. School nursing duties today include pediatric diabetic management, catheterizations, tube feedings, seizure response and monitoring, concussions, allergic reactions, cardiac conditions, injuries due to assault, and most recently, COVID-19 testing. All of this in addition to the routine gastrointestinal disorder, wounds, flu symptoms, and any other chronic and acute conditions affecting both students and staff. As recently as last month, the Maryland Hospital Association reported that there are 3,900 current openings for nurses in the state. Many hospitals and treatment facilities are embracing a team-based approach to nursing. In an attempt to tackle the shortage, the governor recently issued mandates allowing nurse graduates to be hired directly into practice. Neither of these options are helpful to staffing school nursing programs. School nursing requires an autonomous approach to nursing and, as such, requires experienced nurses. I look for nurses with at least 2 years of experience. According to Salary.com, the average starting salary of a new graduate registered nurse in the state of Maryland is $67,500 annually, which is more than $20,000 greater than I am permitted to hire experienced nurses for my schools. While I support a bill requiring a registered nurse in every school, the reality is that unless and until you commit with not only words but funds to making the safety and health of Maryland students a priority, it is simply not attainable.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Tiffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Scott Tiffin. I'm here on behalf of the licensed professional counselors of Maryland, as well as the school-based health centers in Maryland. I just wanted to highlight a point that Ann had already made about the importance that school nurses play in providing behavioral health services. You know, this committee did a lot of work during the blueprint, 3 years, however many years that took, to pass, to emphasize the importance of behavioral health services and greatly increase the funding that was being provided there. That's only doable, it's only really going to help students if there's a school nurse, because school nurses are doing the screenings for kids who need behavioral health services. They're helping connect the family to the services. You know, a lot of these behavioral health providers are only there once a week or once every other week, so the school nurse is integral in scheduling appointments and getting that kid to that appointment. So no matter how much we're investing in behavioral health, that's really only going to get to help these kids if we're actually having a school nurse to help coordinate those services. I also wanted to highlight a chart that's in MNA's, the Nurses Association's testimony, that might help answer Senator Pinsky's question about how many schools in Montgomery County have a school nurse. The chart breaks down every single county, shows how many nurses that county has, how many schools that county has, how many students, and then gives a ratio of student to nurse and also school to nurse. And as you'll see, Montgomery County has a little bit more than half a nurse per school, but some of our counties have even less than that, including Garrett County has 0 nurses in the entire county, or at least who are registered nurses. They use some LPNs. So I just wanted to point that chart out, and we just asked for a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We're going to open up the questions, but I'm going to start. As you said, Mr. Tiffin, the Gorham Commission and then the blueprint. understood and heard the need for healthcare providers on campus. And we started a phase-in of community schools with wraparound services requiring a provider. We didn't say an RN. It could be a nurse practitioner. It could be a social worker. It's physical and emotional health as well. And I believe, and I can't remember exactly, we sort of had a phase-in. I think we started with schools with 80% poverty and then 70% in poverty, 60% working our way down. And we put funding for that position. And we said, it's not an option, you have to do it. Not to direct people, but actually provide service. So we made a start, and we were given a certain amount of money that we could spend, and we tried to do the best we could with that on instruction as well as the wraparound services. I've done a little quick math here, and I used the initial figure about only 38 out of 208 schools in Montgomery County. Now this says it's half. My first calculation was $12 million. Now maybe that's $9 million in Montgomery County, and Baltimore City reports $4 million. I think in terms of having a nurse or a provider at every school, you had us at hello. But the question is the financial piece of this. And we passed legislation to get us started. My guess is this would probably come in at $20 to $40 million, roughly, on the back of an envelope. So, I think Senator Eckert started by saying this is starting a conversation. And this is not the first bill that started a conversation, but we all understood is probably going to be a heavy lift to come up with $20 to $30 million. And, we're the policy committee. B&T is the money committee. And the state made a big commitment 2 years ago, which got delayed a year because of the veto by the governor. So we appreciate starting the conversation. We also know it's a money item, and while there's some extra money going around the state, the line out the door, the queue out the door, is about a mile long with people with very well-intended projects. Whether it's safety net, whether it's a nurse in every school, whether it's adding this or adding that. And I think to not extend this conversation too long, committee, I think we understand this is the beginning of a conversation. It's going to be a heavy lift and not going to get done this year, as 2 or 3 other bills started a conversation. So let's try to keep it pointed, understanding that we're talking about dollars here, not about our belief in what has been presented to us today. So isn't that so, Senator? Let's go to Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of had a question kind of along the lines of your earlier question. One thing you mentioned was how much different the school nurse position is to when it was, the 90s and previous. And I can remember being a child in elementary school in the 80s with a family friend that was a nurse. I used to like to go visit her, part because I really liked her, and part because that was the only room in the school I think it had air conditioning in the warmer times. But anyhow, that's beside the point. When we look at the certification levels currently of the nurses that are in, do you have a ballpark how many are at the RN level, and I guess LPN and the other practitioners? I mean, is there a kind of a ballpark you give us statewide of, the different levels? Like, so are RNs at 20% of the nurses are RNs and 40% LPN? Do you have any idea of that?
It depends on what county you're in. Every county has their own model. Oh, I'm sorry, every county has their own model. Anne Arundel and Montgomery, I know, actually use CNA. A lot of people use CNAs, certified nursing assistants, in their health rooms. Charles County, up until about 5 years ago, actually had an RN in every school. And even because of the nursing shortage, we can't staff that anymore. We are currently using the health department because the nurses are hired through the health department, but we're also using 3 nursing staffing agencies, and we can't staff RNs in every school. So while it's the ideal situation, with the shortage the way it is, unless we do something to get more nurses interested, which is dollars, it's not sustainable.
Okay. And as we talk about starting conversation, I think it's good, we learn kind of where we're starting as far as the training levels. So thank you.
Can I add briefly onto that?
That's up to the chairman.
Is that okay?
And just to put a fine point to the good senator's point, We just passed this morning, I think on the floor, the healthcare shortage of people in the healthcare field, Senator Beidel's bill. We know there is a shortage, and obviously even staffing up to achieve what you're encouraging, I don't know how many hundreds of people that is. That'll be an additional challenge, which we acknowledge, and we want to get to the bottom of the shortage and what incentives, in fact, are needed to do that. Seeing no questions, and we understand this is the beginning of a conversation, we thank all of you for your patience and staying this late. Thank you, and we heard the message pretty clearly. And we also, obviously, we thank what you do, those people who are on the front lines in our schools helping our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, committee. Can we end the screen?